Chapter 390. Jian Qin did not turn down Qin Ji's request. After thinking about it for a while, he agreed in an extremely straightforward manner. Following this, Jian Qin temporarily stayed in the imperial palace of the Qin Empire. Although his days were as carefree as an immortal's, Jian Qin was still somewhat unaccustomed to life in the imperial palace. At night, there were always several armored guards and maids waiting outside the palace door. On one hand, they were there to ensure Jian Qin's safety, and on the other hand, they were there to serve Jian Qin. Even when Jian Qin walked around the imperial palace, there were always several guards and maids following behind him. If it wasn't for the fact that Jian Qin knew that this was a treatment that every distinguished guest had to enjoy, he might have really suspected that these people were here to monitor him, afraid that he would do something improper in the imperial palace of the Qin Empire. The next day, Qin Ji found Jian Qin early in the morning and brought Jian Qin to stroll around the imperial palace. He constantly introduced Jian Qin to every place in the imperial palace. Jian Qin didn't bring the white tiger with him when he strolled around the imperial palace. He didn't want the white tiger to be exposed to too many nobles, so before he left, he fed the white tiger several heavenly treasures, causing the white tiger to fall into a deep sleep with a blissful expression. The imperial palace of the Qin Empire was very large. Jian Qin and Qin Ji walked around for an entire day and only managed to explore 2/3 of the imperial palace. The remaining 1/3 was either not in time or was in some forbidden areas. During this day, Jian Qin also got to know many young masters and young ladies from noble families through Qin Ji's introduction. Their ages were all around the same age as Jian Qin and Qin Ji. However, in front of these people, Qin Ji didn't introduce Jian Qin in detail. He only said that Jian Qin was a friend that he had made in private. This caused many young masters and young masters from noble families to disdain Jian Qin. However, Jian Qin's resolute and handsome face caused many young ladies of prominent status to cast strange glances at him. There were even a few lively and cheerful young ladies who directly opened their mouths to express their goodwill to Jian Qin. However, Jian Qin's popularity caused some young masters and young masters of noble families to be dissatisfied. Their gazes towards Jian Qin were filled with intense jealousy. After Jian Qin and Qin Ji left, many prominent princes and young masters immediately sent people to inquire about Jian Qin's background. However, the results they obtained made everyone sigh in relief. This was because the information they found out was that Jian Qin didn't belong to any major power. He was an unknown character. According to their guesses, even if Jian Qin had a certain background, it was at most a power that couldn't be shown in public. In the evening, Jian Qin finished his day's tour of the imperial palace. He and Qin Ji returned to the dazzling palace for a meal. This was Qin Ji's residence, and it was extremely large. There were several palaces, and all kinds of living facilities and leisure facilities were available. Just as Jian Qin and Qin Ji were eating and chatting happily, a guard in armor ran in from outside. He knelt on one knee in front of Qin Ji and said respectfully, "Third Prince, Princess Qin Shuang, Princess Qin Yubing, and the Southern Commandery Princess have arrived at Cloud Palace." Cloud Palace was the palace where Qin Ji lived. Hearing this, Qin Ji frowned slightly and muttered, "Strange, why are they here?" Then, Qin Ji seemed to have thought of something. He looked at Jian Qin meaningfully and laughed. "Please, quickly invite them in." "Yes, Third Prince," the guard answered and immediately retreated. After the guard left, Qin Ji and Jian Qin toasted each other and smiled faintly. "Brother Jian Qin, I don't have such a deep friendship with the three of them. This is the first time they have come to my residence. I think they are here for you." Jian Qin drank the wine in his cup and smiled bitterly. "Brother Qin Ji, you are being sarcastic." Qin Ji glared at him and said with a serious face, "Sarcastic? I am not being sarcastic. Jian Qin, don't doubt my words. Let's wait and see." Soon, Three beautiful young girls in the prime of their lives slowly walked in from outside. These three were the most cheerful of the many princesses he had seen in the palace during the day. Princess Qin Shuang, who was standing in the middle of the crowd, winked at Qin Ji mischievously and said in a delicate voice, "Brother, Qin Shuang has never come here to see you before. Don't tell me you don't welcome me, your sister Huang?" Qin Ji laughed and said, "Welcome, welcome. How can I not welcome you? My two sisters, the Southern Commandery Princess, please sit down. You must have not eaten yet. Servants, quickly prepare 3 sets of tableware." The two princesses and the Southern Commandery Princess were forthright and generous girls, but their speech and behavior were full of the temperament of a lady from a noble family. They thanked Qin Ji politely. When the 3 of them sat down, Princess Qin Yubing glanced at Genshin and then said to Qin Ji, "Oh, right, brother. You have not introduced this friend of yours to me. I am very curious. How did you two meet?" Hearing this, Qin Ji winked mischievously at Genshin and explained with a smile, "There is no harm in telling you. Brother Genshin and I met at the mercenary tournament. We felt like old friends at first sight and have since become friends. Moreover, this brother of mine is the king of mercenaries who obtained first place in this year's mercenary tournament." "Ah, so he is the Genshin who obtained first place in the mercenary tournament." The two princesses and the Southern Commandery Princess revealed a very surprised expression. The way they looked at Genshin changed again, a pair of bright and beautiful eyes flashing with a strange light. Seeing the 3 princesses and the Southern Commandery Princess staring at him without blinking, Genshin could not help but bitterly smile in his heart. He then fiercely glared at Qin Ji. However, Qin Ji acted as if he did not see Genshin at all. A faint smile hung on the corner of his mouth as he continuously stuffed the delicacies on the table into his mouth. He was very happy to eat alone. "Wow, Genshin, you are so powerful. You are actually the first place in this year's mercenary tournament. This means that you must be even more powerful than our brother. Come, I, Citoyen, propose a toast to you." The Southern Commandery Princess immediately raised the cup in her hand and said to Genshin with a heroic expression. She had the demeanor of a chivalrous woman. After Citoyen, Qin Shuang and Qin Yubing also raised their cups. The 3 princesses and the Southern Commandery Princess proposed a toast to Genshin at the same time. At this moment, of course, Genshin could not back down. He stood up from his seat and raised his cup with a smile on his face. He said some polite words to the 3 princesses and the Southern Commandery Princess and the Southern Commandery Princess. Then the 4 of them clinked their cups. Just as they were about to drink the wine in their cups, a loud noise came from outside. "Young Master Xiaohan, you can't go in. Without the 3rd prince's permission, you can't enter Yunxian Palace. Young Master Xiaohan, please don't make it difficult for us. Without the 3rd prince's permission, you can't enter Yunxian Palace. Get out of my way. Who do you think I am? I don't need to inform the 3rd prince when I come to visit." As he spoke, a young man about 25 years old strode in from outside. The young man looked dignified and wore a gorgeous green robe. Between his eyebrows, there was a strong sense of arrogance. He gave off the feeling that he did not care about anyone in the world. Behind the young man, 2 armored guards tried to stop him. However, the young man's status was not low. He had barged into the 3rd prince's Yunxian Palace, but the guards did not dare to do anything to him. "3rd prince, please forgive us." The 2 guards helplessly apologized to the 3rd prince. Qin Ji looked at the young man expressionlessly. Then he waved his hand at the 2 guards and said, "You 2 can leave now." "Yes, 3rd prince." The 2 guards acted as if they had been pardoned and quickly left. Qin Ji looked at the young man who had barged in and said in a deep voice, "Xiaohan, why did you suddenly come to my Yunxian Palace?" The young man named Xiaohan smiled and cupped his hands at Qin Ji. "3rd prince, tomorrow is His Majesty's 50th birthday. Xiao Han has come here to discuss the birthday gift with Third Prince. If I have disturbed you, Third Prince, please don't blame me." As soon as he finished speaking, Xiao Han suddenly looked at Qin Shuang, Qin Yubing, and the South Commandery Princess. He was shocked and said, "I didn't expect the two princesses and the South Commandery Princess to be here as well. What a coincidence. Oh, three princesses, what are you doing?" Xiao Han looked at the two princesses, the Southern Princess and Jian Chen, in surprise. Even an idiot would know what the four of them were doing from such a scene. A hint of jealousy flashed in Xiao Han's eyes. However, he smiled and said, "Princesses, are you toasting with the third prince's friend?" Princess Qin Shuang, Princess Qin Yubing, and the South Commandery Princess frowned at the same time. There was a hint of disgust in their eyes. They were very disgusted with Xiao Han. Princess Qin Yubing did not even look at Jianqin. There was a faint smile on her face. She raised her wine glass and smiled at Jianqin. "Let's drink." Princess Qin Yubing's voice was very soft. It made people's hearts tremble. Then Qin Shuang and the South Commandery Princess raised their wine glasses at the same time with smiles on their faces. Seeing this, Xiao Han was furious. The jealousy in his heart was even stronger. He quickly said, "You can't do this. The three princesses are of great status. How can you drink with a stranger so casually? It's beneath your dignity." Hearing this, Qin Ji was furious. His calm eyes suddenly became fierce. He said in a deep voice, "Xiao Han, what do you mean by that? Could it be that the friends of my Qin Ji do not have enough status to drink with the three princesses?" Chapter 391. Xiao Han's words made Qin Ji's expression immediately become extremely ugly. However, before he could say anything, Princess Qin Yubing stared at Xiao Han with a frosty expression. She said angrily, "Xiao Han, is it your business who we drink with?" "That's right, Xiao Han. What we do is our own business. What does it have to do with you?" Princess Qin Shuang's face was also ugly. "Xiao Han, how high do you think your status is? If you didn't have a good grandfather, you wouldn't even have the qualifications to step into my Qin Huang Imperial Palace. How strong do you think you are? How amazing do you think you are? You're even inferior to my imperial brother. To think that your grandfather wasted so many heaven and earth spirit medicines on you. Even now, you're still only a great saint master. What a waste." The Southern Princess also spoke back, not giving Xiao Han any face. Hearing these words, Xiao Han's face became more and more gloomy. His eyes became incomparably cold. Qin Shuang and Princess Qin Yubing were both heavenly beauties and as beautiful as flowers. They had always been the targets of Xiao Han's pursuit. In the past, he had expressed his love for the two princesses more than once. Although he had been heartlessly rejected, Xiao Han had never given up because he believed that with his status and position in the Qin Empire, he was worthy of the two princesses. As long as the time was right, it wouldn't be too difficult for his grandfather to personally propose marriage to the king. However, he didn't expect that the two princesses he had always pursued in his heart would say such unpleasant words to him for an unknown stranger whose appearance made him jealous. How could Xiao Han, who had always boasted of his status, endure this? Especially the words of the Southern Princess. It was like a sharp sword fiercely stabbing into Xiao Han's heart. It deeply insulted Xiao Han. Xiao Han was so angry that he couldn't speak. His face turned green and white. Seeing that Xiao Han was defeated, Qin Ji had a gloating expression on his face. He said indifferently, "Xiao Han, my two sisters and the Southern Princess are having a meal with my brother. I already have a plan for my father's birthday, so there's no need to discuss it. Brother Xiao Han, please go back." Qin Ji looked outside and shouted, "Men, send Xiao Han back." Immediately, two maids walked over and bowed to Xiao Han. They smiled and said, "Young master, Xiao Han, please." Xiao Han took a few deep breaths as the flames of fury in his heart burned fiercely. He blamed all of this on Jianqin. At this moment, his jealousy and resentment towards Jianqin had reached an extreme. Fine, fine, fine. Southern Princess, if you say that I am not as good as the third prince, then I, Xiaohan, will accept it. Because, compared to the third prince, who is extremely talented, I, Xiaohan, am indeed not good enough. But I want to ask, could it be that the person in front of you, is he that powerful? Apart from being a little handsome, he's not as good as me in terms of status, position, or strength. Xiaohan said word by word. The jealousy and resentment in his heart made him lose his mind. When the Southern Princess heard that, a mocking smile appeared on her face. She looked at Xiaohan with disdain and said, Xiaohan, you only have your status because you have a good grandfather. You didn't earn it with your own efforts. As for your strength... The Southern Princess looked at Jianqin with her beautiful eyes and then looked at Xiaohan with disdain. She said mockingly, in terms of strength, you're not even as good as the third prince, let alone Jianqin. Humph, what's so great about him? I don't believe he's stronger than me. Xiaohan was furious. He glared at Jianqin and shouted, Boy, I, Xiaohan, want to challenge you. Do you dare accept? Jianqin frowned. Xiaohan's attitude made him very unhappy. At that moment, Qinji said, Xiaohan, the Southern Princess is right. You're not my brother's match. Don't embarrass yourself. You too. Hurry up and send Xiaohan back. Qinji's tone was very calm. He didn't have a good impression of Xiaohan, so he didn't give him any face. Yes, Your Highness, young Master Xiaohan, piss off. Just as the two maids were about to ask Xiaohan to leave again, they were pushed aside by Xiaohan. Xiaohan stared at Jianqin with an extremely gloomy expression. Powerful saint force surged out of his right hand, condensing into a huge sword that was as wide as a palm. He pointed the sword at Jianqin and said angrily, Do you dare accept my challenge? Xiaohan's provocation infuriated Jianqin. He immediately slammed the table and stood up. His eyes were sharp as he shouted, Xiaohan, you can't do whatever you want in Xingyun Palace. If you continue to be so rude, don't blame me for not giving you any face. However, the enraged Xiaohan had already lost his mind. He ignored the third prince's words and pointed his huge sword at Jianqin. He said again, Do you dare accept my challenge? How dare you? Qinji slammed his hand on the table. He was so angry that he wanted to teach Xiaohan a lesson himself. Jianqin raised his hand to stop Qinji. He stared at Xiaohan coldly and said indifferently, Brother Qinji, since this brother wants to challenge me, I'll grant him his wish. Qinji hesitated for a moment before nodding. He said to Jianqin, Brother Jianqin, please go easy on him. Go easy on him? Teach him a good lesson. He comes to harass me every few days. It's so annoying, Princess Qin Shuang said unhappily. That's right, so annoying. Princess Qin Yubing's eyes also showed a trace of disgust. Jianqin looked at Xiaohan and said, Do it. Xiaohan said in a deep voice, Let's go outside. This place is too small. I don't want to destroy the third prince's Xingyun Palace. There's no need. Jianqin shook his head gently and said indifferently, I can't be bothered to move. Don't worry, I won't destroy anything here when I deal with you. Jianqin's disdain made Xiaohan even angrier. He said angrily, How arrogant. I'll make you pay. With that, Xiaohan raised a saint weapon and slashed at Jianqin with all his strength. Princess Qin Shuang, Princess Qin Yushuang, and the commandery princess of the South Mansion exclaimed in unison. They quickly retreated a distance, fearing that they would be affected. Jianqin snorted coldly. He waved his hand, and a chopstick on the table flew up by itself. It shot toward Xiaohan with a faint violet sword chi. Arg! Along with a miserable cry, a chopstick pierced through Xiaohan's right shoulder, stabbing into the bone that connected to his arm. Xiaohan didn't dare to move his right arm at all. Wow, Jianqin, you're so strong. Too strong, too strong. Jianqin, you're too strong. You used a chopstick to defeat a great Saint Master like Xiaohan. Jianqin, you must teach me this move. The two princesses and the southern princess all clapped and cheered as they looked at Jianqin in admiration. Their eyes were filled with stars. Seeing that Xiaohan wasn't injured, Qin Ji sighed in relief. This was someone who dared to kill the young masters of the Shi and Jie clans. He was worried that Jianqin would take Xiaohan's life in a fit of anger. Why aren't you taking Xiaohan to heal? Qin Ji waved his hand and ordered the two maids to escort Xiaohan away. Xiaohan endured the pain in his arm and glared at Jianqin with eyes full of hatred. He then left without looking back. After suffering such a great loss, he didn't have the face to stay. After Xiaohan left, Jianqin looked at Qin Ji and asked, "Brother Qin Ji, what is the background of this person called Xiaohan? His status seems to be quite high." Qin Ji sat down again and said, "Xiaohan's identity is indeed a bit special. In the palace, he's almost equal to us princes because his grandfather is the imperial teacher of our Qin Huang kingdom. He has a prominent status and is respected by everyone. Even my father has to treat him as an equal. 5 years ago, Xiaohan's father was the commander of the imperial guards of our Qin Huang kingdom. One time, when my father was attacked outside, Xiaohan's father used his own body to block the enemy's fatal attack for my father. Xiaohan's father died because of that. Because of that, my father dotes on Xiaohan and takes great care of him. That's why Xiaohan's status is almost equal to us princes. So that's how it is. How strong is Xiaohan's grandfather?" Jianqin asked. "A heaven Saint Master, and an extremely talented fifth cycle heaven Saint Master." Qin Ji's face became serious. "An extremely talented fifth cycle heaven Saint Master," Jianqin murmured. Then a faint smile appeared on his face. After the meal, the two princesses and the southern commandery princess bid farewell to Jianqin and left one after another. Jianqin returned to his own resting quarters and sat cross-legged on his bed with his head lowered in contemplation. Tomorrow was the birthday of the Qin Huang Kingdom's emperor, and he still didn't know what he was going to present to the emperor. However, apart from a heaven-tier battle skill, a large amount of heavenly resources, and a Class 6 monster core, there didn't seem to be anything valuable on him. He definitely couldn't give away the heaven-tier battle skill. As for the Class 6 monster core, with the strength of the Qin Empire, he believed that it wouldn't be too valuable. At this moment, an idea flashed through Jianqin's mind. With a flip of his hand, a thumb-sized pill appeared in his hand. This was the second Class 8 Radiant Spirit pill that Uncle Xiao had given him. Back then, he couldn't bear to use it, so he had kept it. Chapter 392. The birthday celebration of the King of the Qin Empire officially began the next day. Jianqin was called out by Qin Ji very early in the morning, and the two of them left together to celebrate the birthday of the King of the Qin Empire. Today, the imperial palace was especially lively. Many high-ranking nobles and members of the imperial family were all dressed up and brought birthday gifts. Accompanying them were the leaders of the various major powers in the Qin Huang kingdom. In short, anyone who could enter the Qin Huang kingdom's imperial palace was not a simple person. The Qin Empire was extremely powerful. It was in existence only second to the 3 great empires on the continent. Even with the entire continent in perspective, the Qin Empire could be regarded as a peak empire. As a result, aside from the various organizations in the empire, the people who came to celebrate the birthday of the king of the Qin Empire were all people of great statuses. They were either princesses or ministers of the empire. There were even a few imperial advisors who had personally come. Jianqin followed behind Qin Ji and arrived at an extremely large hall. When they arrived, there were already over 1,000 people gathered there. They were all dressed in luxurious clothes and possessed extraordinary bearings. They were all people who could be seen in public. Groups of palace maids in palace attire carried stacks of snacks as they walked in and out of the hall. They served every esteemed guest politely. "Greetings to your highness." "Greetings to your highness." Quite a few people immediately bowed or clasped their hands in greeting when they saw Qinji enter. They were either extremely respectful or filled with enthusiasm. Facing these people, Qinji returned their greetings with a warm smile. His attitude was easygoing and respectful. He didn't have the air of a prince at all. Jianqin followed behind Qinji with half his body. He liked to keep a low profile, so he did not want to become the center of attention. Unless he had no other choice, he would not show off. Naturally, many of the nobles in the hall noticed Jianqin. Some of them only thought that Jianqin was Qinji's follower and didn't pay much attention to him. However, the other group of people were more insightful. They could see that Jianqin had an extraordinary bearing. He was neither servile nor overbearing when facing the crowd. He always looked at them with a calm and emotionless gaze. His every movement carried the demeanor of an expert. Although he was young, he gave people a feeling that he was as steady as a mountain. Moreover, some people who were not weak even faintly felt a pressure from Jianqin's body. Their faces immediately revealed a look of horror. Strange. Why do I feel that the person beside His Highness the Third Prince looks familiar? I feel like I've seen him somewhere before. A middle-aged man in a gorgeous robe with a resolute face stared suspiciously at Jianqin, frowning as he muttered to himself. He wasn't the only one who felt this way. Many people in the hall felt that Jianqin looked familiar, but at the same time they felt a little unfamiliar. However, they couldn't remember where they had seen him before. "Brother Jianqin, you should find a place to rest first. I still have to attend to the guests." At this time, Qinji said apologetically to Jianqin. Today was his father's 50th birthday. As the ruler of the Qin Empire, he naturally wouldn't personally attend to these people. Moreover, the people who had come this time were all people of high status and power. There were even envoys from neighboring countries. So naturally, he couldn't let ordinary people take care of these people. His Majesty's sons and daughters were in charge. Moreover, this kind of gathering was a great opportunity for the princes of the Qin Empire to form factions. They could use this opportunity to build a solid foundation for their future struggle for the throne. Jianqin was no longer a child who didn't understand anything. He naturally understood how important this kind of gathering was to the third prince Qinji, so he very understandingly separated from Qinji. Then he took some delicious snacks and walked to an inconspicuous corner to sit down. He slowly enjoyed these delicious snacks that could only be eaten in the palace. At this time, a middle-aged man in a blue robe came to Jianqin's side and sat down. He looked at Jianqin, who was engrossed in eating the snacks with a smile on his face, and said, "This little brother, have we met somewhere before?" Jianqin raised his head to look at the middle-aged man, but he didn't have the slightest impression of him. He shook his head and said, "You must have seen wrongly, or you may have met someone who looks a bit like me." Hearing this, the middle-aged man nodded his head and said, "Perhaps. Right, I am Taimu Zhuang. What is this little brother's name?" Jianqin chuckled and said, "This little one is just a nobody. I'm not from the Qin Empire. I'm afraid you won't recognize me even if I tell you, so there's no need to mention it." Jianqin had just finished eating the snacks on his plate. He picked up the plate and left, going to the table in the center of the hall to take another one. After Jianqin left, Taimu Zhuang frowned and thought. He muttered, "An unknown nobody? Is that really so? Why do I feel like I've seen you somewhere before?" After thinking for a while, Taimu Zhuang couldn't find the answer, so he left in boredom. "His Majesty the King has arrived." At this moment, a long and loud voice suddenly rang out. Following this voice, the noisy hall suddenly became silent. At this moment, everyone couldn't help but turn their heads to look at the front of the hall. They saw a dignified middle-aged man wearing a purple and gold dragon robe, accompanied by a white-haired old man with a ruddy complexion, slowly walk out. The king of the Qin Empire was just 50 years old, but on the surface he looked like he was only 40 years old. His face was ruddy and full of spirit, and his eyes were bright and full of spirit, flashing with the light of wisdom. The king of the Qin Empire had a total of 12 children, 7 princes and 5 princesses. The oldest was already more than 30 years old, and the youngest was not even 6 years old. At this moment, all 13 of his children were following behind him. "Greetings, Your Majesty. May Your Majesty live a long life and lead the Qin Empire to greater prosperity and strength." Everyone in the hall shouted in unison. Living a long life was the highest lifespan on the Tianyuan continent. Normally, only the king of a country could enjoy such a title. This was because 1,000 years was the lifespan of a heaven saint master. Saint rulers and even saint kings, who were above heaven saint masters, could not live past 10,000 years. They were all in the 1,000 number. Next, everyone presented their carefully prepared birthday gifts. Without exception, all of the gifts were priceless. There were even some precious items that were beyond the value of money. In addition, there were many ancient, antique ceramics that were incomparably valuable. There were also many heavenly resources that were more than 10,000 years old, but they were all at least 10,000 years old. When most of the people had presented their gifts, a purple and gold jade box appeared in Jianqin's hand. He then held it with both hands and strode forward. He clasped his hands at the king of the Qin Empire and smiled. "Inside this box is a Class 8 Radiant Spirit Pill. I've specially come to present it to Your Majesty to congratulate Your Majesty on Your Majesty's birthday." Jianqin was much more concise and did not use any fancy words. "A Class 8 Radiant Spirit Pill? I heard that only Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters can create such a pill. It's truly a panacea for healing. Not only can it purge the body of all poisons, but it can also save people from dying. Class 8 Radiant Spirit Pills are extremely rare on the Tianyuan continent. They're life-saving treasures that even hermits covet. They're life-saving treasures." A few of the more experienced people in the hall began to sigh in amazement when they heard that it was a Class 8 Radiant Spirit Pill. They all stared at the box in Jianqin's hand with shining eyes because Radiant Spirit Pills of such a high level were basically extinct on the Tianyuan continent. Not only was it because Class 7 Radiant Saint Masters who could create such pills were as rare as phoenix feathers, but it also required a tremendous amount of effort to create such pills. The appearance of the Class 8 Radiant Spirit Pill had even moved the king. As the ruler of an empire, it was not difficult for him to obtain all sorts of heavenly resources and wondrous treasures. However, the significance of the Class 8 Radiant Spirit Pill was completely different. This was because it could be used to save lives. If used properly, its value would be immeasurable. The king signaled with his eyes, and a white-robed old man immediately walked out of the crowd. He accepted the box in Jianqin's hand and poured out a thumb-sized pill from a white jade bottle to examine it. The old man was a Radiant Saint Master, so he could clearly sense the extremely dense Radiant Saint force within the pill. After confirming that there was no mistake, the old man beamed with joy. He carefully placed the pill back into the bottle before clasping his hands at the king. "Your Majesty, this is indeed a Class 8 Radiant Spirit Pill." The old man was extremely excited because such a high-level pill was just far too rare. Qin Ji glanced at Jianqin gratefully from behind the king. He knew extremely well just how valuable a Class 8 Radiant Spirit Pill was. Yet Jianqin was actually willing to give something so valuable to the king as a birthday gift. The significance of this was so great that even Qin Ji felt proud. The gazes of the other princes who did not know Jianqin's background changed slightly as well. They all smiled and nodded at Jianqin in a friendly manner. A Class 8 Radiant Spirit Pill was not something that just anyone could take out. Jianqin's unintentional actions proved his identity without a doubt. The king immediately laughed heartily after hearing the old man's confirmation. Even the way he looked at Jianqin changed. He asked amiably, "Brother, you have an extraordinary bearing. I can tell with a single glance that you're a dragon among men. May I ask which family's young master you are to be willing to offer such a precious gift? You really make me feel ashamed. Father, he's Jianqin. He's a friend I've made outside. Qinji said politely from behind the king before Jianqin could reply. As soon as Qinji finished speaking, a few cries rang out from the crowd. Jianqin. I never thought that he would be Jianqin. No wonder I found him to be a little familiar. Is he the Jianqin who won first place in this year's mercenary tournament? His strength is comparable to a Heaven Saint Master. No wonder I felt like I'd seen him somewhere before. So it's him. I remember now. He's the Jianqin who won the title of Mercenary King. I saw him in the tournament. No wonder I found him to be a little familiar. It's because he's missing his hair and eyebrows. I actually failed to recognize him immediately. Chapter 393. Hearing these people's comments about Jianqin, the nobles in the hall all revealed astonished expressions. Soon after, they all looked at Jianqin with shock and disbelief. Everyone knew the name of this year's king of mercenaries, Jianqin. However, very few people had actually seen Jianqin before. What no one expected was that Jianqin was actually so young. From his appearance, he looked even younger than the third prince. In that case, Jianqin had cultivated for a few years, less than the third prince. However, he possessed such great strength. This allowed everyone to see Jianqin's shocking talent. The king of the Qin Empire immediately laughed heartily. He looked at Jianqin with amazement and said, Good, good, good. I didn't misjudge you. Jianqin is indeed a dragon among men. To be able to obtain first place in the mercenary tournament at such a young age, your future is limitless. It is my son's fortune to be able to befriend you. Xiao Han, who was standing in the crowd, stared at Jianqin with a gloomy expression. His eyes were filled with a venomous light. He gnashed his teeth and muttered, I didn't expect you to be that *T king of mercenaries. Humph, no matter who you are, I, Xiao Han, will not let you off easily. Hearing Xiao Han's muttering, a middle-aged man in green clothes stood beside Xiao Han and asked in a low voice, Xiao Han, could this person be the one who insulted you yesterday and injured you? That's right, Uncle Mu Xiaoye. You must help me teach him a lesson. Otherwise, I, Xiao Han, will not be able to take this lying down, Xiao Han said in a low voice. Mu Xiaoye was his grandfather's disciple and had a close relationship with him. Mu Xiaoye frowned slightly and said in a low voice, I'm afraid this won't be easy. I didn't expect him to be this year's king of mercenaries, Jianqin. Although I don't know how strong he is, I think he must be much stronger than the third prince. Moreover, he has obtained the recognition of His Majesty. If I make a move against him, I'm afraid His Majesty will be displeased. Uncle Mu Xiaoye, how old is he? Even if he can strengthen the third prince, he is definitely not your opponent. Perhaps he used some other method or got lucky to obtain that *T king of mercenaries. You can challenge him in public and humiliate him. As for His Majesty, I will naturally have my grandfather take action, Xiao Han said in a low voice. Mu Xiaoye nodded and said, All right. It just so happens that I want to test his strength and see if this year's king of mercenaries is as powerful as the rumors say. After learning that Jianqin was this year's king of mercenaries, the king of the Qin Empire became much friendlier towards Jianqin. On the other hand, when the other princes standing behind him heard that Jianqin was the third prince's friend, some of their faces became extremely ugly. Only 2 of the younger princes remained calm, as if none of this had anything to do with them. Jianqin and the king exchanged some pleasantries before returning to the crowd. However, at this moment, all the nobles and leaders in the hall treated Jianqin differently. They all scrambled to establish a relationship with Jianqin. This was because every year, if the king of mercenaries could successfully mature, he would become a Heaven Saint Master at the very least. There was even a very high chance that he could break through to Saint Ruler. To these people, Jianchen could only use his scalp and patiently return their greetings. At this moment, a loud and clear voice rang out in the hall, suppressing the noise in the hall. "Your Majesty, our Qin Empire has always relied on martial prowess to establish our empire and defend our empire. Today is your Majesty's birthday, so how can martial prowess be absent from the banquet? Your humble servant is itching to spar with the king of mercenaries, Jianchen. It can also be considered a performance on your Majesty's birthday as a gift. Please allow me, your Majesty." Hearing this, everyone turned their heads and saw a middle-aged man in azure clothes kneeling on one knee as he respectfully spoke to the king of the Qin Empire. Hearing this, the king of the Qin Empire looked at Jianchen with a smile and introduced, "Jianchen, this is the commander of the Imperial Guards, Mu Zhe." The king did not agree or disagree with Mu Zhe's request. Instead, he gave the choice to Jianchen because he really wanted to see what Jianchen was capable of. Jianchen smiled indifferently and walked out with large strides. He cupped his hands and said, "Since Commander Mu Zhe wishes to spar with me, then I will perform with Commander Mu Zhe. It can also be considered a gift to your Majesty." The king happily laughed and said, "Good, good, good. If that's the case, then let us all go outside and cheer for the two of you." Soon after, the king walked out of the palace accompanied by an old man. Behind him was a large group of nobles and leaders of various factions. In a spacious area, everyone formed a circle around Jianchen and Mu Zhe. Everyone was in high spirits. The battle between the king of mercenaries and the commander of the Imperial Guards was destined to be very exciting. In everyone's hearts, they wanted to know who was stronger between Jianchen and Mu Zhe. Only a few people who had personally witnessed Jianchen's strength at the mercenary conference revealed meaningful smiles. Mu Zhe held a light azure spear in his hand as he stared at Jianchen with a serious expression. Although Jianchen was much younger than him, he couldn't be careless because of his title as the king of mercenaries. Jianchen calmly stood 30 meters away. He calmly looked at Mu Zhe and said, "Commander Mu Zhe, please make your move." Mu Zhe couldn't help but frown when he saw that Jianchen actually wanted to fight him without taking out a saint weapon. Anger flashed through the depths of his eyes. In his opinion, Jianchen was blatantly humiliating him. Mu Zhe's gaze turned cold as he snorted. He stomped his feet on the ground and shot toward Jianchen. At the same time, his spear surged with wind-attributed saint force as it stabbed toward Jianchen. Jianchen wore a faint smile the entire time. He gently stomped his right foot on the ground, and a thumb-sized pebble shot up. Jianchen calmly caught it in his hand. With a shake of his hand, the pebble flickered with a faint azure light as it shot toward Mu Zhe with lightning speed. Ding! With a clear sound, the thumb-sized pebble accurately struck the tip of Mu Zhe's spear. An inconceivably powerful force was transmitted from the pebble, causing the spear in Mu Zhe's hand to tremble. Mu Zhe's expression changed drastically. The powerful force immediately stopped his forward charge. He staggered back a dozen steps before stabilizing himself. His hands that were holding the spear began to tremble slightly. The web between his thumb and forefinger had already ruptured as blood flowed out. Mu Zhe paled in fright as he looked at Jianchen in shock. His face was filled with disbelief. Mu Zhe found it hard to accept that he couldn't even catch a pebble with his strength. Seeing how Jianchen had ruptured the web between Mu Zhe's thumb and forefinger with a single pebble, the surrounding people were all in an uproar. They all looked at Jianchen in disbelief. The impact of this scene was just too great. Did Jianchen use a battle skill? Many people thought to themselves. The king of the Qin Empire also sucked in a deep breath. He stared at Jianchen in shock for a while before shooting a glance at the old man behind him. Just a single pebble was enough to make the commander of the Imperial Guard suffer. This scene made the king realize that Jianchen's strength was much greater than he had imagined. Using an Earth Saint Master would not be able to accurately gauge Jianchen's strength, so he could only send someone stronger. The old man behind the king nodded slightly before striding forward. He said, "Jianqin, let old man deal with you." With that, the old man did not give Jianqin a choice. He turned into a blur as he charged toward Jianqin. A strange smile appeared on Jianqin's face. With a light tap of his finger, a faint azure sword chi shot toward the old man. The old man knew how powerful Jianqin was, so he did not dare to be careless. He clenched his hand into a fist and punched toward the azure sword chi with surging fiery red Saint force. The azure and violet sword chi was dispersed by the old man's punch, and a shocking wound appeared on the old man's fist. The old man looked at the wound on his fist, and his expression gradually became serious. Then he grabbed the air with his hand, and the fire elements in the world rapidly gathered. In the blink of an eye, they condensed into a huge red sword. Jianqin sneered when he saw this. He slowly raised his right hand, and the fire elemental energy in the surroundings immediately condensed at a speed much faster than the old man's. It also formed a huge fiery red sword. Whether it was the color or the temperature, it was much more powerful than the old man's sword. Controlling the energy of the world. He can actually control the energy of the world. This is an ability to control the energy of the world. Has he already reached the level of Heaven Saint Master? The sight of Jianqin condensing the energy of the world into a sword shocked everyone present. At that moment, the shock that Jianqin gave them was many times greater than when he had easily repelled Mu Zhe. Whether it was the nobles or the leaders of the various organizations, all of their eyes were wide open as they stared at Jianqin in disbelief. They had seen Heaven Saint Masters before, but they had never even heard of such a young Heaven Saint Master. How is this possible? Jianqin has actually broken through to Heaven Saint Master. Qinji also stared at Jianqin in a daze as he muttered in a daze. The king of the Qin Empire sucked in a deep breath and slowly calmed himself down. At that moment, he felt like his heart had never beat so violently before. If news of a Heaven Saint Master in his 20s spread, it would be enough to shake up the entire Tianyuan continent. Chapter 394. Shock and disbelief appeared in the eyes of the old man fighting Jianqin when he saw that Jianqin was actually able to condense the energy of the world into a sword. However, he immediately waved his hand, and the huge sword of flames shot toward Jianqin. Jianqin attacked at the same time as the old man attacked. With a gentle wave of his right hand, the huge sword in front of him shot toward the old man. Boom! 2 streaks of fiery red light flashed and disappeared. 2 huge swords, which seemed to be able to burn the air, collided in the middle of the 2 people. Following a violent boom, flames lit up the sky. A huge fireball, which brought along an unbearable high temperature, rapidly spread out in all directions. Run! Back off! Protect His Majesty! The spectators in the surroundings immediately fell into chaos as they all retreated. At the same time, multicolored saint force flowed out of their bodies, forming a barrier to protect themselves and the important people around them. The expression of the king of the Qin Empire changed slightly when he saw the flames rapidly approaching him. However, at this moment, a white figure flashed by. An azure-robed old man, radiating with dense, wind-attributed saint force, instantly arrived before the king of the Qin Empire. He grabbed the king by the shoulder and flew into the air, escaping the range of the sea of flames. Figures flickered in the surroundings of the imperial palace. Earth Saint Masters with powerful ripples of saint force hurried over from various parts of the imperial palace, accompanied by groups of golden-armored guards. All of them rushed over in a hurry. At the same time, 4 old men and 2 middle-aged men strode out from the crowd. The 6 of them formed a circle around the sea of fire. Then they waved their hands in unison, using violent palm winds to suppress the flames that were rolling towards them. Jianqin and the old man had already been swallowed by the flames. However, although the flames were powerful, they did not affect them much. When the flames were a meter away from the two of them, they were stopped by an invisible force, unable to advance any further. "Old man will go up and fight with you," the old man shouted as he shot up into the sky. In the blink of an eye, he was floating 500 meters above the ground. His body had shrunk to the size of an ant. Around his body, a thick layer of fire element enveloped him. Jianqin did not show any signs of weakness. With a thought, the wind elements between heaven and earth rapidly gathered towards him. Then they wrapped around his body and flew into the air, hovering 100 meters away from the old man. What? Why you can actually control the wind elemental energy? The old man stared at the wind elemental energy around Jianqin with his mouth agape. His face was filled with shock. The faint azure light around Jianqin was obviously noticed by the people below as well. All of them were extremely shocked, and the Heaven Saint Masters hidden in the crowd involuntarily cried out as if they had seen a monster. Disbelief filled their faces. How is this possible? He clearly has fire attribute, Saint Force. How can he control wind attribute, Saint Force now? Does he not have fire attribute, Saint Force, but wind attribute, Saint Force? Impossible! No one has ever been able to control two elements on the Tianyuan continent. He must be using some method that we don't know about. Jianqin, can you control both the fire and wind elements at the same time? The old man hovering in the air asked in shock. Jianqin faintly smiled. He did not deny it and said, "That's right. I can indeed control both the fire and wind elements." "No, that's impossible. How can you control two elements at the same time? This has never happened on the Tianyuan continent," the old man cried out. Jianqin said, "Nothing is impossible in this world. There are many things that are even more profound and inconceivable in this world. It's just that this level of comprehension is not something that we can touch upon." Although the old man was extremely shocked that Jianqin could control two types of energy of the world, he still calmed down very quickly and said, "You're right. The mysteries of the world are still not something that we can completely understand." It looks like the old man has lost his composure. The old man paused before a huge, fiery red sword appeared in his hand. He glared at Jianqin and said, "Today, let me see just how powerful someone who can control two elements is." Jianqin smiled and raised his hand slightly. Immediately, all the pebbles in the pool seemed to be pulled by a mysterious force. They all broke out of the water and flew into the sky extremely quickly, hovering before Jianqin. "What's going on? Why are all the pebbles flying into the sky? What kind of ability is this? How did he do it?" Everyone's eyes widened when they saw this strange sight. They all discussed in great surprise. The king of the Qin Empire stared at the sky under the protection of two Heaven Saint Masters. He mumbled to himself, "This Jianqin is even more complicated than I imagined. He's reached Heaven Saint Master at such a young age. Such a genius is rarely seen on the Tianyuan continent even in 1,000 years." A Heaven Saint Master beside the king's side in amazement when he heard that it's not just rare, it's basically rare even in 10,000 years. With the talent he has displayed, he'll become a saint ruler at the very least if he matures successfully. It won't be difficult for him to reach the level of the Holy Emperor. The king's expression immediately changed when he heard that. Even the princes standing behind the king were shocked when they heard this. They found it difficult to remain calm, and their gazes toward Qin were filled with deep envy and jealousy. On the other hand, Qin joy was indescribable with words after personally witnessing Jianqin's outstanding ability. At this moment, the old man in the sky began to move. He no longer dared to look down on Jianqin, so he used his full strength. He charged toward Jianqin with his huge sword and flames that could vaporize the air. Chapter 395. Watch out for my sword. The old man flew in front of Jianqin and yelled out. His huge sword was covered in flames as it slashed toward Jianqin. Jianqin's gaze suddenly sharpened as a faint azure and violet light flickered in his eyes. The huge sword made of countless pebbles in front of him shone with a hazy azure and violet light as it shot toward the old man like a bolt of lightning. Boom! With a violent boom, the old man's huge sword collided with the sword made of countless pebbles. Quite a lot of the flames on the huge sword were dispersed, turning into sparks that shot in all directions. From afar, it looked like fireworks had bloomed in the air. It was an extremely spectacular sight. The old man's attack had reduced quite a few of the pebbles to dust, but there were still quite a few pebbles that remained in perfect condition that continued to shoot toward the old man. The old man's body was obstructed as he forcefully came to a halt in the air. Hearing the ear-piercing sound of something tearing through the air, the old man's face could not help but become even more stern. He immediately swung his huge sword and slashed out with surging fire-attributed Saint force, forming a magnificent red blur in front of him that blocked the incoming pebbles. Normally, these pebbles would be as weak as tofu before a Heaven Saint Master. They could be crushed without any effort, but the pebbles that had been strengthened by Jianshin's azure and violet sword chi had become extremely powerful. As a large number of pebbles collided with the old man's huge sword, the sound of continuous explosions rang out in the air. Now, the old man's body had been completely restrained by the pebbles. Under the control of Jianshin's mind, the pebbles had already scattered and surrounded the old man, attacking him from all directions. Just what kind of strange ability is this? The old man was secretly shocked. His body had already been protected by a barrier of fire-attributed Saint force. He fended off the pebbles around him as he tried to think of a way to break free. It wasn't that he hadn't thought of ignoring the attacks around him and directly charging towards Jianshin, but the attacks from the cobblestones were just too powerful. It would be very difficult for him to block the attacks with just a layer of energy around him. Moreover, the attacks were very concentrated, making it difficult for him to move an inch. Jianshin grabbed at the air with both hands, and the fire elemental energy in the surroundings rapidly gathered as streams of light. They quickly condensed into two huge, fiery red swords in front of him. As soon as the swords were condensed, they turned into a streak of fiery red light that shot towards the old man. The temperature it gave off seemed to even burn the air. Wherever it passed, the surrounding space became a faint pink color. The old man's face had already become extremely stern. He sent out two strands of sword chi with lightning-like speed, colliding with the two swords condensed from flames from Jianshin. With an intense rumble, the fiery light enveloped the sky. The waves of fire were like a magnificent army galloping in the sky, and also like a gorgeous flower blooming in the sky. The waves of fire that filled the sky were like surging waves that swept out in all directions. At this moment, the temperature in the world suddenly soared, making countless people in the palace below feel as if they were in a huge steamer. The scorching heat was unbearable. Jianshin's eyes flickered with a resplendent light. Suddenly, the wind in the surroundings whistled through the air, producing ghostly wails and howls. It blew away the waves of fire that surged toward Jianshin and headed toward the old man, completely submerging him in a single instant. Jianshin knew that an attack like this would not pose much of a threat to a Heaven Saint Master. At most, it would make him suffer a little. As a result, he did not stop there. Grabbing at the air with both hands, he condensed two more flaming swords that shot toward the old man. The swords immediately disappeared into the sea of fire. The next moment, a violent explosion rang out. The sea of fire churned violently as clouds of fire flew out, dispersing into the surroundings. A white figure flew out of the sea of fire. It was the old man who had been submerged in the sea of fire. Although the old man was not particularly injured, he was in an extremely horrible condition. His hair was disheveled and many of his clothes had been torn. He no longer possessed his sagely bearing from before. The old man hovered in the air in a rather stiff manner. He did not continue to attack, and Jianshin did not attack either. He understood that the old man was only testing his strength. It was not like there was some sort of irreconcilable enmity between them that required them to fight to the death. Very soon, the flames in the sky vanished. The heat that enveloped the entire imperial palace rapidly receded as well. The old man stared at Jianqin with mixed feelings. After being stunned for a while, he sighed in the end. Old man has lost. Jianqin smiled and clasped his hands. You must be joking, old sir. You probably only used less than 80% of your strength in this battle. If you had used your full strength, the outcome probably would have been completely different. The old man waved his hand and said, A loss is a loss. Old man is not a sore loser. Although the old man did not use his full strength, your remaining strength is probably much greater than the old man's. Hearing this, Jianqin smiled and did not continue to dwell on this topic. He then slowly descended from the sky. Jianqin and the old man landed on the ground at the same time. Although there were over 1,000 people present, the entire place was silent. Whether it was the king of the Qin Empire, the members of the royal family, or the leaders of the various large organizations, they all stared blankly at Jianqin's young and handsome face. Not only had Jianqin reached the level of a heaven saint master at such a young age, his strength had also greatly exceeded everyone's expectations. He had even caused an imperial advisor of the Qin Empire to sigh in admiration. At this moment, everyone was stunned by Jianqin's great strength and terrifying talent. If he could reach the level of a heaven saint master in his 20s, just how terrifying would his strength be when he was 50 or even 100 years old? Wow, Jianqin, you really are too powerful. You've actually reached the level of a heaven saint master. The silence was broken as the southern prefectural princess stared at Jianqin with a face full of admiration. She clapped her hands and cheered. Princess Qin Shuang and Princess Qin Yubing also looked at Jianqin with a strange light in their eyes. Other than them, there were many other princesses and young ladies who looked at Jianqin with deep admiration. There were even a few young ladies who looked at Jianqin with infatuation. Although Jianqin's hair and eyebrows had yet to grow back, he was still extremely handsome. Coupled with the fact that he had reached the level of a heaven saint master at such a young age, becoming a peak expert on the continent, he had become the Prince Charming of many of the young ladies present. Ha ha ha, good, good, good. Jianqin's strength has truly broadened our horizons. Jianqin, since you're friends with my son Jianqin, you're no longer an outsider. I'll be so bold as to call you my nephew. How does that sound? The king of the Qin Empire loudly smiled. He was very excited. Qin Ji, who stood behind the king of the Qin Empire, also faintly smiled. At that moment, he suddenly realized that he had never felt so excited before. At the same time, he was also rather shocked. Jianqin's sudden display of strength as a heaven saint master had given him quite a fright. This was just far too shocking for someone of Jianqin's age. Jianqin calmly accepted the king of the Qin Empire's goodwill. This was something that would only benefit him. He immediately clasped his hands with a smile and said, This is Jianqin's honor. The king of the Qin Empire was overjoyed. He laughed heartily again and said, Since the battle is over, let's all return. Nephew Jianqin, let's go back to the skyscraper hall. With that, the king smiled deeply. He then grabbed Jianqin's hand in an extremely friendly manner and made his way back to the hall. He asked about Jianqin's well-being with great concern along the way, constantly calling him nephew. Xiao Han, who was hidden in the crowd, stared blankly at Jianqin. His face was blank, as if he had suddenly become stupid. Impossible. Impossible. How could he be a heaven saint master? This must be an illusion. Yes, it must be an illusion. Xiao Han's lips trembled slightly as he mumbled to himself in an almost inaudible voice. His voice was filled with shock and disbelief. At this moment, the pale-faced Mu Zai arrived before Xiao Han. Seeing Xiao Han's blank expression, he gently sighed and scolded. You've offended someone you can't afford to offend. I never thought that he would become a heaven saint master so soon. With such talent, his future is limitless. Even Imperial Protector Ta is not his opponent. Looks like even your grandfather might not be able to defeat him. No, I have to tell your grandfather about this. Xiao Han's face immediately changed when he heard that. He quickly grabbed Muzai's hand and said hopefully, Uncle Muzai, do you think my grandfather will seek justice for me? Muzai's face could not help but change when he heard that. He viciously glared at Xiao Han and said softly, Why are you still so foolish? Don't bring this up again. Jianqin is also a Heaven Saint Master, and a talented one at that. Even the king is trying his best to rope him in. Your grandfather is no threat to Jianqin at all. If you don't repent, even your grandfather will be implicated. Xiao Han's face paled as he said with a trembling voice, Uncle Muzai, what should I do now? Muzai sighed and said, You better apologize to Jianqin quickly. I have to tell your grandfather about this matter. I hope he can turn this matter into a small one, and a small one into nothing. Very soon, everyone returned to the hall they had been in before. The king pulled Jianqin to the front of the hall and sat down on the dragon throne. He then ordered a palace made to bring over a luxurious chair for Jianqin to sit beside him. He treated Jianqin more warmly than he treated his own children. The nobles and royal relatives did not object to the king's actions at all. They all smiled and nodded at Jianqin in a friendly manner, as if Jianqin really did deserve such treatment. The king of the Qin Empire could not hide his excitement. He looked around and cleared his throat, loudly announcing, Since everyone is here, I will use this opportunity to announce a decree. Now, I appoint Jianqin as the imperial protector of the Qin Empire. Does anyone have any objections? Chapter 396. P.S. The internet was cut off yesterday, so I couldn't update. For chapters will be updated today. This is the second one. The third chapter will be updated before midnight. The fourth chapter will be updated after midnight. The king of the Qin Empire couldn't hide his excitement. He looked around, cleared his throat, and said in a loud voice, Since everyone is here, this king will take advantage of this good opportunity to announce a decree. Now, this king appoints Jianqin as the imperial protector of the Qin Empire. Does anyone have any objections? As soon as the king finished speaking, the entire hall fell silent. Everyone stared at the king with their mouths agape. Their faces were filled with surprise and disbelief. The imperial protector and the state preceptor were two completely different levels of status. The imperial protector was much more powerful than the state preceptor in both status and power. An imperial protector could not only mobilize a large number of troops of a kingdom at will, but he could also order the state preceptor to do things for him. In addition, the imperial protector also had a very terrifying power. He could behead the incapable emperor and kill all the civil and military officials in the court. His power was almost comparable to that of the monarch of a country. The king of the Qin Empire obviously saw Jianqin's unprecedented potential, so he appointed Jianqin as the imperial protector. The king of the Qin Empire's order not only stunned everyone in the hall, but even Qin Ji, who was standing next to him, had a look of disbelief on his face. His mind had already gone blank. After a while, the silence was finally broken. An old man with a head full of white hair strode forward and cupped his hands, saying, Your Majesty, this absolutely cannot be done. With Jianqin's ability, he is indeed qualified to be the state preceptor, but if he is appointed as the imperial protector, I'm afraid it will be very inappropriate. Your Majesty, Prime Minister Kirill is right. The imperial protector has too many implications. It is indeed inappropriate to rashly appoint him. Why don't we let Jianqin be the state preceptor first? Another old man stepped forward. Your Majesty, the imperial protector cannot be appointed rashly. It must be approved by all the state preceptors of the Great Qin Empire, or be approved by several esteemed imperial protectors. The one who spoke was a middle-aged man wearing simple clothes. His face was resolute, and his body emitted a faint, murderous aura. He was a general in charge of guarding a region and had real power. Your Majesty, an endless stream of objections came from all over the hall. Although Jianshin's talent and strength were extraordinary, the imperial protector had too many implications. It could almost be said that he was the ruler of a country. With Jianshin's age, many people did not dare to let Jianshin be the imperial protector, but there were many who agreed to let Jianshin be the state preceptor. At this time, more than 20 people came one after another outside the hall. Most of them were old men, and only a few middle-aged men and 3 middle-aged women in their 30s. These people came quietly and stood quietly at the back of the hall. They did not say a word, and very few people noticed their existence. His Majesty, who was sitting at the head of the hall, noticed the sudden arrival of the group at the back of the hall. He immediately showed a faint smile and said, "Yes, as you said, the imperial protector has too many implications. I indeed do not have the right to appoint the imperial protector. It must be approved by all the state preceptors of the Qin Empire or the 4 esteemed imperial protector." His Majesty stood up from the dragon throne and laughed loudly. "In that case, I invite the state preceptors to judge whether nephew Jianshin can be appointed as the imperial protector." I agree that Jianshin can be appointed as the imperial protector. Several old men standing not far from the king were the first to agree. They were all state preceptors of the Qin Empire. Then they smiled and cupped their hands towards Jianshin, saying, "Greetings to Lord Imperial Protector!" "Your Majesty, I'm afraid it's difficult to convince the public with just the approval of a few state preceptors. If you want to appoint the Imperial Protector, you must get the approval of all the state preceptors of the Qin Empire." An old general cupped his hands and said, "The king of the Qin Empire said with a smile, 'Old General Shu is right. State preceptors, what do you think?'" The king of the Qin Empire looked towards the back of the hall. "We all agree that Jianshin can be appointed as the imperial protector." An old voice was transmitted from the back of the hall. Everyone's gazes involuntarily looked towards the back of the hall when they heard the voice. All of their faces were stunned when they discovered that over 20 people had appeared there at some unknown time. Immediately, they revealed expressions of disbelief. Everyone present was a person of high status, so they all recognized the identity of these 20 people. They were all state preceptors of the Qin Empire. At this moment, all the state preceptors of the Qin Empire had gathered here. The 20 state preceptors walked forward at the same time. The people in front of them consciously made way for them. Soon they came to the front. Their eyes all gathered on Jianshin. Soon after, they all cupped their hands and said, "Greetings to Lord Imperial Protector." Looking at the scene before him, the Qin Huang Kingdom's king immediately laughed heartily and was extremely excited. On the other hand, the authoritative figures in the hall were all dumbfounded. Their faces were filled with disbelief as they looked at the scene before them. At this moment, one of the state preceptors loudly said to everyone, "Everyone, don't doubt this. The appointment of Jianshin as the imperial protector was personally approved by the 4 esteemed imperial protectors of the Qin Empire. Just now, all of us received a message from the 4 esteemed imperial protectors. That's why we've gathered here. If anyone has any doubts about this matter, you can personally go and find the 4 esteemed imperial protectors to verify it." Hearing this, everyone immediately went into an uproar. None of them dared to say another word. The state preceptors of the Qin Empire were all Heaven's Saint Masters. When over 20 Heaven's Saint Masters bowed to him, Jianshin was stunned. He immediately became somewhat at a loss. What he didn't expect was that he had actually become the imperial protector of the Qin Empire for no reason. "Your Majesty, Jianshin's experience is shallow. I'm afraid it'll be difficult for me to take on such an important task." Jianshin immediately cupped his hands towards the king of the Qin Empire. The king chuckled and said, "Nephew Jianshin, appointing you as the imperial protector of our empire was approved by the 4 esteemed imperial protectors of the Qin Empire. Such an important task is not something that I can decide." Jianqin's face immediately became filled with hesitation. Becoming the imperial protector of the Qin Empire was no small matter. This matter had come so suddenly that Jianqin clearly found it difficult to make up his mind without carefully considering the pros and cons. Seeing the hesitation on Jianqin's face, Qin Ji, who was standing beside the king of the Qin Empire, immediately became anxious. He constantly shot Jianqin meaningful glances. His relationship with Jianqin was extraordinary, so he obviously wanted Jianqin to become the imperial protector of the Qin Empire. This was an extremely good thing for him. However, Jianqin didn't notice Qin Ji's meaningful glances at all. This was because he was also caught in a dilemma. Although becoming the imperial protector of the Qin Empire would give him a very high status, Jianqin didn't want to be restricted in any way. The entire hall became deathly silent. Everyone's eyes were focused on Jianqin. As for Xiao Han, who had a conflict with Jianqin, his face had already become as pale as a sheet of paper. His entire body was trembling. The authority of the imperial protector was much greater than his grandfather's. It could be said that there was a clear distinction between a superior and a subordinate. Qin Ji's expression became more and more anxious. He was afraid that Jianqin wouldn't accept the position of the imperial protector of the Qin Empire. In the end, he couldn't help but say, "Jianqin, after becoming the imperial protector of the Qin Empire, you will be able to use the Qin Empire's space gate and various resources of the Qin Empire without any restrictions. Moreover, your authority won't be any weaker than my father's." When he heard that he would be able to use the space gate at will, Jianqin's heart skipped a beat. After a moment of hesitation, he said, "Your Majesty, if I become the imperial protector, will my actions be restricted?" "Of course not. Nephew Jianqin, after becoming the imperial protector of the Qin Empire, you won't be restricted in any way. You only need to stand out when the Qin Empire is in danger. At the same time, you can't do anything that will endanger the Qin Empire," the king said with a smile. Hearing this, Jianqin thought to himself. This matter seemed to be beneficial to him. With the strength of the Qin Empire, the chances of him encountering danger were very small. Thinking of this, Jianqin hesitated for a moment. In the end, he still agreed to become the imperial protector of the Qin Empire. "Greetings, Your Excellency, Imperial Protector." After Jianqin agreed, all the nobles and imperial relatives in the hall bowed to Jianqin. The imperial protector had a very prominent status in the Qin Empire. In some ways, the power of the imperial protector was even greater than that of the king of the Qin Empire. This was because if more than half of the imperial protector agreed, they could directly remove the king of the Qin Empire from his position. They could even ignore the king's objections and easily start a large-scale war. From this, it could be seen what kind of status the imperial protector represented in the Qin Empire. Following this, all the state preceptors and nobles of the Qin Empire came forward to befriend Jianqin. Although Jianqin could only be regarded as a fledgling in their eyes, his potential was still there. His future achievements were simply unimaginable. Even the 4 most respected imperial protector of the Qin Empire were shocked. After Jianqin became the imperial protector, Qin Ji was the happiest, the most excited, and the most excited person present. His face was beaming like a pear blossom, and he couldn't close his mouth for a long time. Jianqin's appearance had undoubtedly stolen the limelight that originally belonged to the king of the Qin Empire. Today was the king's birthday, and he should have been the focus of attention. However, the limelight that should have belonged to him was now completely stolen by Jianqin. At this moment, the king of the Qin Empire didn't feel the slightest bit unhappy. On the contrary, he was very excited. The smile that came from the bottom of his heart didn't disappear from his face. Chapter 397. The 50th birthday celebration of the king of the Qin Empire soon came to an end. In the evening, Jianqin returned to his own palace after bidding farewell to all the influential figures. Now that Jianqin was the imperial protector of the Qin Empire, his status was very different from before. In the imperial palace, he was allocated a luxurious palace decorated with gold and jade. The name of the palace was also changed to Qin Heaven Palace. Qin Heaven Palace was a name that could only be given to the palace where the imperial protector lived. Not only was it vast in scale, even the decorations and layout were much better than the Xingyun Palace where the Qinji lived. Jianqin carried the white tiger, who was still sleeping and digesting the medicinal effects, and arrived at his own Qin Heaven Palace, accompanied by several palace maids. Looking at the splendid decorations around him, Jianqin was secretly speechless. The decorations of Qin Heaven Palace were too luxurious. Jianqin swore that he had never seen such a luxurious palace before. "Lord Imperial Protector, let us servants help you bathe and change your clothes." Several beautiful palace maids behind Jianqin whispered softly. They all looked at Jianqin's back with anticipation. These palace maids were all carefully selected by the king himself. They were all around 20 years old and were the most beautiful people in the palace. Not only were they heavenly beauties, they were also all virgins. Jianqin looked back and forth at the splendid palace. He waved his hand at the palace maids behind him and said indifferently, "All of you are dismissed. Lord Imperial Protector, don't you like us to serve you?" The palace maids looked at Jianqin pitifully with a faint desire in their eyes. Jianqin was so handsome and had such a high status as the imperial protector. To them, it was a great honor to be able to serve Jianqin. "All of you are dismissed. I'm not used to being served. If there's anything else, I'll call for you." Jianqin's tone was very calm. After he finished speaking, he carried the white tiger and walked towards his bedroom. Looking at Jianqin's disappearing figure, the most outstanding and beautiful palace maids, who were carefully selected from the entire palace, could only reveal disappointed expressions. They then left with a regretful heart. Outside Jianqin's Qin Tian Hall, 500 imperial guards in golden armor were like stone statues. They solemnly guarded the surroundings, and every single one of them had an extremely proud expression. To be able to become the imperial protector's personal guard was a great honor to them. Their status in the entire imperial palace was incomparably respected. Other than the other 4 imperial protectors' personal guards, it could be said that no other army had a higher status than them. These imperial guards were all great Saint Masters. They were led by 5 captains who were Earth Saint Masters and 1 general who was a 6th cycle Earth Saint Master. They guarded the surroundings of the Qin Tian Hall day and night. It could be said that they were Jianqin's personal army that was specially made to serve the imperial protector. Even the king was unable to command them. The night quickly passed. Early the next morning, a captain's voice rang out from outside, reporting to the imperial protector, "The third prince, Qinji, wishes to see you." Jianqin had become the imperial protector of the Qin Huang kingdom. In just a single day, Jianqin's status had become much higher than Qinji's. Now, if Qinji wanted to enter the Qin Heavenly Palace, he would need Jianqin's permission. Very soon, Jianqin walked out from the Qin Sky Palace and personally invited Qinji in. This caused Qinji to be overwhelmed by the unexpected favor, causing him to feel extremely emotional. Inside the Qin Tian Hall, Jianqin dismissed all the palace maids and then began to chat with Qinji. Qinji also excitedly congratulated Jianqin on becoming the imperial protector of the Qin Empire. He was truly happy for Jianqin from the bottom of his heart. Jianqin also smiled as he exchanged pleasantries with Qinji. Although his status had changed greatly, it did not affect his mental state at all. He still treated Qinji as a friend because he knew that if Qinji had not invited him to attend his father's birthday celebration, he would not have such a high status. "Jianqin, you are now the imperial protector of the Qin Empire. You can use the spatial gate whenever you want. However, I still hope that you can stay here for a while longer." Qin Ji and Jianqin sat opposite each other and smiled faintly. Jianqin shook his head and said solemnly, "No, I'm in a hurry. Since I can use the spatial gate whenever I want, I'll leave now. The longer I delay, the more uneasy I feel." "Jianqin, can you tell me why you're in such a hurry? Who knows? I might be able to come up with some ideas for you," Qin Ji asked with concern. Now that Jianqin's status had changed greatly, he had to do his best to curry favor with Jianqin. Jianqin hesitated slightly when he heard that. He said, "That's my hometown. There's probably a war there right now. I need to hurry over as soon as possible, or the consequences will be unimaginable." Qin Ji's face also became somewhat stern. He then asked Jianqin about the strength of that region. After hearing that, he immediately relaxed and chuckled. "It's just a small matter. My Qin Empire only needs an army to deal with a few small countries. Jianqin, you can mobilize 1,000,000 elites of my Qin Empire right now. Do you want to send reinforcements?" "There's no need for that. This place is very far from my hometown. With my speed, it'll take me 2 or 3 months to get there. Coupled with the fact that the army moves extremely slowly, it'll probably be several years before they get there," Jianqin rejected without any hesitation. "Then why don't you just take a few imperial protectors with you? With your status, even if you take all the imperial protectors of the Qin Empire, no one will object. Don't worry, my Qin Empire still has 4 extremely powerful imperial protectors. There won't be any problems with your safety," Qin Ji suggested. Jianqin hesitated when he heard that. He knew that the kingdom of Jessen only had around 10 Heaven Saint Masters, while the 4 kingdoms had 20 to 30. The difference was just too great. Seeing Jianqin's hesitation, Qin Ji knew that Jianqin was tempted. He immediately added fuel to the fire. "Jianqin, don't hesitate. Don't forget your current status. You have the authority to mobilize these forces." Jianqin thought about it and nodded in the end. For safety's sake, he decided to take a few imperial protectors of the Qin Empire with him. "Jianqin, the movements of the imperial protectors are not restricted. Moreover, you were the one who gave the order this time, so there's no need to report it to my father. Just order the imperial protectors of the Qin Heavenly Hall to gather the imperial protectors," Qin Ji advised Jianqin. Jianqin did not understand the matters of the imperial palace and his authority as well as Qin Ji. Afterward, Jianqin followed Qin Ji's suggestion and ordered the imperial protectors to invite the imperial protectors to the Qin Heavenly Hall. Very soon, over 20 imperial protectors of various ages gathered in the Qin Heavenly Hall. Although Jianqin was young, his status and strength were there for all to see. His great potential had already won the respect of all the imperial protectors. All the imperial protectors took advantage of the fact that the difference between them and Jianqin was not too great to try to befriend him. They knew that Jianqin's status had been personally appointed by one of the 4 imperial protectors. He would definitely become a saint ruler in the future and even have the chance to become a holy emperor. At that time, it would not be as easy for them to get close to him. Now was the perfect time to cultivate their relationship. Jianqin told his thoughts to the imperial protectors. Immediately, all of them expressed their willingness to go with Jianqin. Their enthusiasm made Jianqin wonder who was the one asking for help between him and the imperial protectors. The feeling was completely reversed. At this moment, a sage-like old man stepped forward and clasped his hands. "Imperial protector, I am Shao Tian. Shao Han is my grandson. I heard yesterday that my useless grandson had actually offended you, Imperial Protector. I hope you can forgive my useless grandson. I have already locked him up and taught him a harsh lesson. Shao Tian is willing to go with you, Imperial Protector, to atone for my grandson's sins. I hope you will allow it." Jianqin immediately looked at Shao Tian and carefully studied him. Shao Tian wore white robes and had a sage-like demeanor. He had white hair and a ruddy complexion. His silver-white hair was tied into a knot above his head. He gave off a heroic aura that faintly gave off an aura of justice. He was very extraordinary. Is this the extremely talented fifth cycle Heaven Saint Master that Qin Ji spoke of? Jianqin thought inside. Hearing about Shao Tian was not as good as meeting him in person. After personally seeing Shao Tian, Jianqin had a feeling that Shao Tian would definitely achieve great things in the future. At the same time, he could vaguely sense an aura of justice from Shao Tian. This was definitely an open and above-board person, very different from his grandson, Shao Han. Although he thought like that, Jianqin's expression did not change. He clasped his hands and smiled. Mr. Shao Tian must be joking. Jianqin has completely forgotten about your grandson. Since Mr. Shao Tian is willing to go with me, Jianqin has no reason to disagree. Jianqin is extremely grateful for Mr. Shao Tian's assistance. Shao Tian laughed heartily and said, Imperial Protector is too modest. To be able to travel with Mr. Imperial Protector is my honor. Afterwards, Jianqin chose 4 Imperial Protectors who were stronger and more reliable to go with him to the kingdom of Jessen. After the selection, everyone left the Qin Heaven Hall together and walked towards the Space Gate under the lead of the 3rd Prince. Out of the 5 Imperial Protectors that Jianqin brought, Shao Tian was the strongest. He was a 5th cycle Heaven Saint Master. Out of the remaining 4, 2 were in the 4th cycle and 2 were in the 3rd cycle. Although these people were not the strongest among the Imperial Protectors, in Jianqin's heart, the 5 of them were the most trustworthy. The Space Gate of the Qin Empire was at the center of the Imperial Palace. With Jianqin's current status, he did not need to report to anyone when using the Space Gate. He brought the 5 Imperial Protectors to the Space Gate. Immediately, 2 of the Imperial Protectors threw out a few Class 5 monster cores to activate the Space Gate. After quickly determining a general location, Jianqin and the 5 Imperial Protectors left the Qin Empire through the Space Gate. Chapter 398. With a single step, Jianqin was already several 100,000 kilometers away from the Qin Empire. When Jianqin and the 5 Imperial advisors came out of the Space Gate, they had already arrived in an unfamiliar region. The Space Gate slowly disappeared after sending them in. Jianqin held the much bigger white tiger in his arms as he scanned the surroundings. He discovered that this was an extremely desolate and dry land. Not a single blade of grass grew on the ground. As far as the eye could see, there was no sign of life. Sir Imperial Protector, what is this place? An Imperial advisor of the Qin Empire softly asked from behind Jianqin. His eyes also scanned the surroundings, studying the environment. Qing Xiaofan, just follow behind Sir Imperial Protector. What's with all this nonsense? Immediately, another Imperial advisor frowned and said. Hearing this, Qing Xiaofan dryly laughed and embarrassedly said, I'm just curious. The 5 Imperial advisors that came with Jianqin were called Shao Tian, Qing Xiaofan, Dongi Junbai, Chao Kaqin, and Tian Luo. Among the 5, there were 4 old men and 1 middle-aged man. The 2 old men who spoke were called Qing Xiaofan and Dongi Junbai. They were 2 4th cycle Heaven Saint Masters, while Chao Kaqin and Tian Luo were 3rd cycle Heaven Saint Masters. The 5 of them were all over 100 years old. At this moment, the white tiger in Jianqin's arms suddenly woke up. It opened its bright eyes and curiously looked around. Noticing the movement in his arms, Jianqin immediately placed the white tiger on the ground. He was no longer willing to hold it in his arms because the white tiger's body had already grown a lot. Its body looked like an adult dog, so it was no longer suitable to stay in Jianqin's arms. As soon as it landed on the ground, the little white tiger immediately began to run happily. It circled around everyone and occasionally came to the feet of the 5 Imperial advisors to sniff around with its cute nose. Jianqin took out a few maps from his space ring and began to look at them. After a while, he threw them on the ground in disappointment and said, I don't have a map of this area, so I don't know where this place is. Let's ask a few passers-by. Jianqin did not have the exact coordinates of the kingdom of Jessen, so the space gate could only send them to an approximate location. Now, Jianqin did not know whether or not he was in the kingdom of Jessen. Qin Shaofeng immediately cupped his hands and smiled. "We'll follow Sir Imperial Protector's decision." "All right then, let's leave this place." As he spoke, Jianqin waved his hand and a dense wind element enveloped the white tiger's entire body. Then he took the white tiger into the air. "Woo-woo, woo-woo-woo." The white tiger immediately cried out in dissatisfaction. Its body kept flapping in the air as if it wanted to jump into Jianqin's arms. It looked at Jianqin pitifully with tears in its eyes. "Haha, Sir Imperial Protector, your magical beast is quite intelligent. It must be the cub of a high-level magical beast." Qin Shaofan immediately joked. Jianqin chuckled and did not explain. He then floated over to the white tiger and knocked its little head. He jokingly scolded, "You're already so big and you still need someone to carry you? I can't carry you now. Let me control the energy of the world to carry you. Don't worry, you won't fall." The white tiger seemed to understand Jianqin's words. It kept shaking its little head and tears were rolling in its eyes as if they would fall to the ground at any time. Then the white tiger's body shrunk at a speed visible to the naked eye. Soon, it turned back into a cub the size of a kitten. It was very cute. This magical beast can actually change the size of its body. It's unbelievable. The 5 imperial advisors all stared with wide eyes as they looked at the white tiger in amazement. Even Jianqin had a shocked expression on his face. However, when he thought of the white tiger's true identity, he understood. He glanced at the 5 imperial advisors behind him from the corner of his eyes and smiled faintly. This white tiger was born different from the rest. This ability to change the size of its body might be its innate ability. That's right. This magical beast looks like a tiger, but it has a pair of wings on its back. It must be a mutated species. Some mutated magical beasts have innate abilities that people don't know about. There are also many magical beasts that can change the size of their bodies on the Tianyuan continent. Dongyi Junbai said in agreement. He was the oldest among the people present and had the most experience. Seeing that no one was looking into the identity of the white tiger, Jianqin secretly let out a sigh of relief. He then picked up the white tiger that had shrunk to the size of a kitten and flew off in a certain direction. An hour later, Jianqin and the others had already flown several hundred kilometers. At this moment, a sizable city appeared in front of Jianqin's eyes. Jianqin's eyes lit up. He immediately sped up and flew over. In the end, he landed in a place with no people and entered the city on foot. This was a Grade 2 city. It was not very large. Jianqin walked through the streets with the 5 imperial advisors of the Qin Empire. The white tiger in his arms constantly looked around, as if it was curious about everything around it. Jianqin went to the largest store in the city and bought a map that recorded the largest area. Very soon, he found the location of the kingdom of Jessen. They were still over 15,000 kilometers away from the kingdom of Jessen. They still had to pass through 2 more kingdoms. "Shopkeeper, I'd like to ask you something. What's the current situation in the kingdom of Jessen? Is there a war going on?" Jianqin asked. "I don't know about the current situation in the kingdom of Jessen. It's too far away, so it's very difficult for news to reach here. However, I've heard that a war broke out in the kingdom of Jessen 3 months ago. It seems like it's a 4-nation alliance. Sigh, the kingdom of Jessen is done for this time." The shopkeeper sighed. Jianqin's expression changed slightly when he heard this. He took out a purple coin and threw it on the table. He took the map and walked out. After determining the direction, he immediately rose into the air and flew toward the kingdom of Jessen. The 5 imperial advisors also rose into the air and followed closely behind Jianqin. They left behind a street full of people who stared at the 6 people in shock. Only after a long while did the street erupt into an intense discussion. In a second-class city, Earth Saint Masters were already very rare, let alone Heaven Saint Masters. Now that 6 of them had appeared, it was easy to imagine how great of an impact it had on everyone's hearts. Jianqin and the others flew day and night without rest. After a day and night of traveling, they finally arrived at the kingdom of Jessen, a neighboring country called the Qiangan Kingdom. He then landed in a small city near the border fortress to gather information. He needed to understand the current situation in the kingdom of Jessen so that he could come up with a plan. Chapter 399. Early in the morning was the peak time for breakfast. Jianqin carried the white tiger to the largest restaurant in the center of the town with the 5 imperial advisors of the Qin Empire. The 6 of them occupied a large round table, which was filled with the most expensive breakfast dishes in the restaurant. The white tiger lay on the table, wolfing down a large plate of delicious barbecued beef that Jianqin had ordered for it. It whimpered excitedly from time to time, attracting the curious gazes of the customers in the restaurant. Jianqin sat at the table with a heavy heart, listening to the discussions around him. He had no appetite at all. The Qiangan Kingdom was very close to the kingdom of Jessen, so they could obtain the most accurate information about the war in the kingdom of Jessen. To the mercenaries who often roamed the Tianyuan continent, not only did the news spread very quickly, it was also more reliable. The kingdom of Jessen is most likely done for this time. The 4 palaces have over 2,000 soldiers in total. How can the kingdom of Jessen stop the allied army of the 4 empires with only a few million soldiers? The territory that the Jessen kingdom occupies is the most fertile area in this region, and has long since attracted the envy of the surrounding kingdoms. Although the kingdom of Jessen has managed to hold on for a few months with their sturdy fortresses, the continuous battles have depleted their forces far too much. I heard that the kingdom of Jessen only has 1 million soldiers, left from the original 6 million soldiers. The entire kingdom is now urgently recruiting more soldiers. The kingdom of Jessen only has around 200 intermediate crystal cannons to support them. I heard that they don't have enough monster cores anymore. Even the large amount of monster cores stored in the national treasury has been used up. The monster cores used to fire the crystal cannons are all donated by the various factions in the kingdom. Half a month ago, a dozen intermediate crystal cannons of the kingdom of Jessen self-destructed because they were used too often. They blasted a few large holes in the fortresses, resulting in the deaths of over 1,000 people. The kingdom of Jessen is far too weak compared to the allied army of the 4 empires. Even if the kingdom of Jessen were to gather all the soldiers and mercenaries they hired, they would not have more than 3 million soldiers. On the other hand, the allied army of the 4 empires has over 10 million soldiers and twice as many peak experts as the kingdom of Jessen. The kingdom of Jessen is doomed this time. I heard that 2 Heaven Saint Masters from the kingdom of Jessen died 7 days ago. 3 of them were heavily injured. On the other hand, only 1 Heaven Saint Master from the allied army was on the verge of death. I heard that he was saved by a Radiant Saint Master in the end. The rest of them only suffered some injuries of varying severity. There weren't many losses. Jianqin's face became more and more solemn as he listened to the news. Although the situation was not as bad as it seemed, the kingdom of Jessen was not in a good situation. The difference in strength was just too great. You don't know about this. I just returned from the Flaming Kingdom 3 days ago. I heard that there was a Heaven Saint Master from the kingdom of Jessen who was extremely powerful. He fought against 6 Heaven Saint Masters from the allied army by himself. Although he was heavily injured in the end, he used a shocking Heaven-tier battle skill to kill 2 Heaven Saint Masters and heavily injure 3 others. In the end, the Heaven Saint Masters of the allied army all lost their courage to continue fighting and fled miserably. Yeah, I've heard about this as well. I heard that the powerful Heaven Saint Master used to keep a very low profile in the kingdom of Jessen. He wasn't even ranked among the 10 great experts. Very few people know of his existence. I think his name is Chang Wuji or something. At this moment, a few more travel-worn mercenaries walked in from outside. Hearing the discussions of the crowd, the leader immediately said, "That's nothing. That Chong Wuji's strength must have reached the peak. Otherwise, it's impossible for him to possess such battle prowess. Let me tell you something even more shocking. In the battle 3 days ago, an Earth Saint Master heavily injured a Peak Heaven Saint Master from the Blue Wind Kingdom. That's impossible. How can an Earth Saint Master be the opponent of a Heaven Saint Master? I don't believe it. Who are you trying to fool?" Everyone in the restaurant snorted disdainfully. They didn't believe the mercenary's words at all. I'm not lying to you. I heard that the Earth Saint Master even knew a Heaven Tier battle skill. He used it to heavily injure a Heaven Saint Master. If it weren't for a Heaven Saint Master from the Four-Nation Alliance who saved him in time, that Heaven Saint Master probably would have been killed in a single strike. TSK, that scene was so spectacular. Once the Heaven Tier battle skill was used, the weather changed, and a thick layer of dark clouds gathered in the sky. The ground was covered in sand and rocks, making it impossible to see anything clearly. I heard that the Earth Saint Master's Heaven Tier battle skill directly caused a violent earthquake. The earth shook and the mountains shook. It almost collapsed the fortress of the Kingdom of Jesson. Everyone was stunned by the Earth Saint Master's battle prowess. No wonder I felt the ground shake 3 days ago. It can't be real, right? That's just too terrifying. This place is at least 1,000 kilometers away from the fortress of the Kingdom of Jesson. How can it be so far away? The earthquake caused by a Heaven Tier battle skill can actually reach so far away. That's just too ridiculous. The man continued, "That's not all. I heard that the Earth Saint Master is wind-attributed Saint Force. His speed is unbelievably fast. He's basically a monster. He managed to contend with a Heaven Saint Master for half a day with just his speed alone. 2 Heaven Saint Masters tried to hunt him down, but he managed to escape easily. His speed is just too monstrous. It can't be that powerful. Is he really an Earth Saint Master?" The people in the restaurant all paled. The Earth Saint Master was just far too powerful. Hearing the discussions, Jianqin couldn't help but reveal a faint smile. He had already guessed that the Earth Saint Master with unimaginable speed and a Heaven Tier battle skill was definitely Mingdong. The man obviously knew a lot of the latest news. He proudly continued, "The death of 2 Heaven Saint Masters is something that the 4 countries can't accept. 2 days ago, the 4 countries sent an army of 2 million to attack the northern fortress of the Kingdom of Jesson. The battle lasted for an entire day and night, and blood flowed like rivers. Corpses piled up like mountains. Now, the northern fortress of the Kingdom of Jesson is in tatters. Even the tempered steel gate has been deformed. Both sides have suffered countless casualties. I heard that a Heaven Saint Master from the Kingdom of Pingyang even captured a general alive and chopped off his arms and legs. He's been hanging on the fortress of the Kingdom of Pingyang for an entire day. That's just too cruel. Don't tell me that the Kingdom of Pingyang has some sort of deep grudge with that general? Is there a need to do this when they have the upper hand? Both his arms and legs have been chopped off. That general must be a famous general." Everyone in the inn was discussing animatedly. The information brought by this burly man was the latest news, which attracted everyone's attention. The man chuckled and shook his head. "You've guessed wrong. That general isn't some famous general. Instead, he's an unknown commander. I think his name is Changyang Hu, and he's only a major general." As soon as the man finished speaking, Jianqin, who was eating breakfast not far away, suddenly trembled. His face suddenly changed and turned pale. His body turned into a shadow and arrived in front of the man in an instant. His slender fingers tightly grabbed the man's collar and lifted him up from the bench. He shouted, "What did you just say?" Whose arms and legs were chopped off and are hanging on the fortress wall. Jianqin's eyes were red and sharp. "Bastard, you're courting death." The man was also a hot-tempered man. He immediately flew into a rage and roared. His hands were about to grab Jianqin's neck. "Speak!" Jianqin roared like an enraged lion. The entire restaurant trembled slightly with his roar. At that moment, his eyes became extremely sharp. They shone like lightning, stabbing deeply into the man's eyes like a sword. It made the man's eyes hurt. Just his gaze alone was enough to make the man not dare to look him in the eye. At the same time, an extremely powerful killing intent radiated from Jianqin. It soared into the sky, making everyone in the restaurant feel like they had fallen into an ice cavern. They felt cold from head to toe. The noisy and immediately fell silent. Everyone stared at the furious Jianqin in shock. They remained where they were as they trembled, not daring to move at all. Just from this aura, everyone present knew that this young man in front of them possessed a terrifyingly powerful strength. The man who had been grabbed by the collar by Jianqin was scared silly. He no longer had the arrogance from before. His face was extremely pale, and he trembled all over. The killing intent radiating from Jianqin was overwhelming. It was extremely powerful, making the man feel like he could not breathe at all. It was as if he was about to suffocate to death. T kill me. WW, what do you want to know? I'll tell you everything I know. The man finally lost his temper. His face was filled with fear, and his voice trembled. Jianqin gave him the feeling of an inviolable god of death. It made him tremble from the bottom of his soul. Jianqin stared at the man with an extremely sharp gaze. He did not hide the intense killing intent in his eyes at all. He roared furiously, "Who has his arms and legs cut off and is hanging on the wall? If you dare to lie to me, I'll make sure you die a horrible death." Jianqin practically roared out the last sentence. His eyes were already slightly bloodshot. Chapter 400. After receiving confirmation, Jianqin's expression became extremely gloomy. The murderous aura that radiated from his body quickly spread out from the inn and enveloped the entire street. Everyone on the street couldn't help but shrink their necks. They felt as if the temperature between heaven and earth had suddenly dropped to a few dozen degrees below zero. Not only did they feel cold all over, but even their souls were trembling. The 5 imperial advisors of the Qin Empire who came with Jianqin looked at each other and saw a trace of shock and astonishment in each other's eyes. The murderous aura radiating from Jianqin was so strong that it made all 5 of them feel extremely frightened. "Big brother." There was a faint red color in Jianqin's eyes, as if there was blood condensing in them. He murmured in a low voice and then threw the burly man out. His figure flashed, and he was already out of the inn. Then a surge of wind element madly rushed toward him and wrapped around his body. His body quickly rose into the air. A faint green light flashed and then disappeared. Jianqin flew into the distance at lightning speed and disappeared in the blink of an eye. "Lord Imperial Protector!" The imperial advisors of the Qin Empire shouted one after another. They all stood up from their seats and looked extremely serious. When they saw Jianqin's expression and thought about what the burly man had said, they all guessed that the person who had his hands and feet cut off must have a close relationship with Lord Imperial Protector. "The 5 of you immediately depart and assist the Kingdom of Jessin in fighting against the allied forces of the 4 empires. Protect everyone in Changyang Prefecture." Jianqin's voice sounded in the ears of the 5 imperial advisors. His voice was extremely cold. Jianqin's voice transmission stunned the 5 imperial advisors. Their eyes were filled with shock. The 5 of them looked at each other, and Xiaotian, who was the strongest among them, said, "Let's go. We'll all go to the kingdom of Jessin." Woo woo woo, woo 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 woo. Jianqin's sudden departure made the white tiger very sad. He couldn't care less about the delicious barbecued beef on the table. He jumped down from the table and turned into a white shadow as he ran to the entrance of the inn. He looked at the sky with watery eyes and kept howling. His voice was filled with desolation, as if he was a child who had been heartlessly abandoned by his mother. He looked very pitiful and pitiful. Looking at the pitiful appearance of the white tiger, the 5 Qin Empire's imperial advisors couldn't bear to see him like this. Xiao Tian gently walked forward and cradled the white tiger in his arms. He then turned around and said to the others, "Let's go." Then the 5 Qin Empire's imperial advisors walked out of the inn and directly flew into the air. They disappeared into the sky, leaving behind the stunned people in the inn. Jianqin's body was wrapped in a thick layer of wind-attributed Saint force. His entire body emitted a strong layer of pale green light. Even in the daytime, he was very eye-catching. Now he had raised his speed to the limit and hurriedly flew towards the border fortress of the kingdom of Pingyang. In Jianqin's mind, he couldn't help but recall the scenes of him and his elder brother, Changyang Hu. In Jianqin's heart, Changyang Hu was definitely a family member that he couldn't forget. Although his elder brother didn't help him much in the past at Kargath Academy, and he even helped his elder brother a lot, his elder brother Changyang, whose care for him came from the bottom of his heart. At that time, Changyang, who was the 4th person in Jianqin's heart besides his parents and Changyang Mingyue. Although Jianqin had wandered outside for a few years, he was still the same old Jianqin. His temperament hadn't changed much. Those family members of the past were still the biggest concern in Jianqin's heart. "Elder brother, you can't let anything happen to you. Otherwise, I, Jianqin, swear that I will raise the kingdom of Pingyang to the ground and let the 4 allied countries accompany you in death." Jianqin's face was incomparably gloomy. His eyes were faintly bloodshot. That strong killing intent was enough to make people tremble in fear. The kingdom of Jessin was surrounded by 6 other kingdoms. The Qiangan kingdom, the Pingyang kingdom, and the kingdom of Jessin were all connected in a triangle. Jianchen flew away from the border fortress of the Qiangan kingdom and followed the directions on the map for 2 hours. After crossing over 3,000 kilometers, he finally arrived at the border fortress of the kingdom of Pingyang. From afar, the huge fortress of the kingdom of Pingyang appeared in Jianqin's mind. The 80-meter-tall walls were filled with stern-looking soldiers. Currently, the fortress of the kingdom of Pingyang had gathered over 2 million soldiers. Looking from the sky, just the tents alone stretched for several kilometers. There were even large tents set up outside the fortress. Groups of patrolling soldiers shuttled through the tents. The vanguard of the kingdom of Pingyang had already gathered over 1 million soldiers outside the northern fortress of the kingdom of Jessin. Although they were all attacking the northern fortress of the kingdom of Jessin, the 2 million soldiers here were all reserve troops. If the front line needed them, they could be sent over at any time. Jianqin stopped a dozen kilometers away from the kingdom of Pingyang. His eyes were filled with pain as he looked ahead. His body that was 1,000 meters in the air was also trembling. 15 kilometers away, a man with severed arms and legs was hung on the wall of a fortress. His clothes were dyed red with blood, and he looked like a bloody man. His long hair was tied up with a thick hemp rope, and his body was hung on the wall. Although they were a dozen kilometers apart, Jianqin's divine sense could clearly see the other party's appearance. That familiar face, wasn't it his elder brother, Changyang Hu? A few years had passed, and Changyang Hu hadn't changed much. However, at this moment, his face was as pale as a sheet of paper. His eyes were tightly shut, and it was unknown whether he was dead or alive. Seeing his elder brother, Changyang Hu, in such a pitiful state, Jianqin's eyes were bloodshot. 2 streaks of blood flowed down from his eyes. His body that was suspended in the air was trembling violently. It was as if he couldn't control himself and was about to fall from the sky. In the past, he had thought more than once about how much shock and joy he would bring to his few relatives when he returned home and saw them. In the past, he had thought more than once about what expression his elder brother, Changyang Hu, would have when he returned to Kargath Academy and saw his current strength. However, he had never thought that when he returned home with such great achievements and met his elder brother, Changyang Hu, he would be met with such a heart-wrenching tragedy. It was a scene that he couldn't accept. Elder brother. Jianqin let out a sorrowful cry. His eyes instantly turned red. An extremely strong killing intent gushed out from his body like a huge wave, dispersing the clouds. Then Jianqin's figure turned into a green light and rushed to the top of the fortress wall at a speed that couldn't be seen with the naked eye. The 2 million soldiers in the fortress of the Pingyang Kingdom were all alarmed. The soldiers who were resting in their tents all crawled out and looked up at the sky. With a dignified expression, they stared at Jianqin, who was flying over. Boom, 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 boom. The dull sound of war drums came from the top of the fortress. The sound was very urgent, indicating that a great enemy was about to invade. The whole city was on alert. On top of the fortress wall, a middle-aged man wearing armor walked out from the tower. Seeing Jianqin flying over, his face suddenly became very dignified. He shouted, "Release the crossbows!" As soon as his voice fell, the sound of air breaking could be heard one after another. Huge crossbows as thick as an arm shot towards Jianqin with ear-piercing sounds. Jianqin's eyes faintly flashed with purple light. When those crossbows shot out for a few kilometers, their speed suddenly decreased greatly. Soon they were suspended in the air. Then, under the shocked gaze of all the soldiers below, all the crossbows actually slowly changed direction in the air. Then, a layer of hazy purple light suddenly flashed. Every crossbow arrow with a faint purple light suddenly shot back towards the fortress. The expression of the general who was standing on top of the fortress wall changed greatly. However, before he could give any orders, the reversed crossbows shot towards the fortress wall at a speed that was much faster than when they were shot. Boom, 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 boom. Following a series of violent explosions, numerous holes appeared on the sturdy fortress wall, stirring up a large cloud of dust. Countless soldiers were pierced through the chest, and several towers immediately collapsed. At this time, Jianqin had already arrived in front of Changyang Hu. He cut off the hemp rope that was hanging Changyang Hu with an incomparably sorrowful expression. His eyes were filled with tears of blood, and he held Changyang Hu's body very carefully in his arms. Big brother, looking at the unconscious Changyang Hu, Jianqin's face was filled with grief. Now his big brother had almost become a cripple. He was unable to accept this fact. Jianqin hurriedly took out a few radiant spirit pills from his space ring that he had obtained during the elimination round of the mercenary tournament and fed them all to Changyang Hu to save his life. Although Changyang Hu was not dead, his situation was extremely terrible. He had lost too much blood, and his life was hanging by a thread. The general standing on top of the fortress wall immediately took out a precious jade from his space ring and crushed it before leaping off the wall and disappearing. With his strength as an Earth Saint Master, he was basically powerless in front of a Heaven Saint Master. The only way he could survive was to flee. Release the arrows, shoot him down. The soldiers below all began to yell out. They all drew their bows and aimed at Jianqin. Arrows shot towards Jianqin like moths to a flame, blotting out the sun. The killing intent in Jianqin's eyes had already reached its peak. At this moment, his eyes suddenly turned purple as a powerful mental force permeated the surroundings. Before the arrows shot towards Jianqin could even approach Jianqin's body, they all stopped in the air. Afterwards, they changed directions and shot towards the soldiers below at an even faster speed. Immediately, miserable cries rang out from below as the densely packed soldiers collapsed in droves. With their strength, it was impossible for them to survive after being pierced by the arrows with azulite sword chi. Jianqin controlled the tens of thousands of arrows to shoot through the crowd below, mercilessly slaughtering the soldiers below. In just a few short breaths, not a single one of the hundreds of thousands of soldiers stationed outside the fortress was spared. Afterwards, the tens of thousands of arrows under Jianqin's control quickly condensed into a huge sword that was several dozen meters long in front of Jianqin. It shot towards the fortress with lightning speed. Chapter 401. Boom! With a loud boom, the giant sword formed by tens of thousands of iron arrows fiercely bombarded the sturdy fortress walls. The fortified walls that had been strengthened countless times and had enough defensive power to withstand the bombardment of magic crystal cannons instantly became as fragile as tofu. A huge hole with a diameter of over 30 meters was blasted out of the wall. This scene caused the millions of soldiers in the fortress to turn pale with fright. The soldiers who were closer to the fortress hurriedly fled in all directions to avoid being hit by the falling rocks. Genshin's eyes had completely turned into a purplish-green color with a hint of scarlet. His voice was extremely gloomy as he said, "Today I will destroy this fortress. The kingdom of Pingyang, I, Genshin, will make you pay a heavy price." Towards the end, Genshin said each word with a pause. Every word was squeezed out from between his teeth. The hatred in his heart had already reached an extreme, enveloping an area of over 10 kilometers, causing the temperature of the area to rapidly drop. Boom! Another thunderous sound rang out. The giant sword formed by tens of thousands of iron arrows carried with it the power to destroy the heavens and earth as it fiercely bombarded the sturdy stronghold. A huge hole appeared in the stronghold. The 30-meter wide stronghold was completely penetrated. Suddenly, a few long whistles rang out from afar, accompanied by a powerful presence that filled the area, for figures could be seen flying over from the back of the fortress. Genshin's entire body radiated with a cold, killing intent. His gaze was extremely sharp as he stared at the 4 Heaven Saint Masters flying over from the fortress of the kingdom of Pingyang. The huge sword formed by tens of thousands of arrows carried a faint purplish-green light as it streaked across the sky like a meteor, shooting towards the 4 Heaven Saint Masters with lightning speed. The 4 Heaven Saint Masters of the kingdom of Pingyang roared in unison. The 4 of them simultaneously sent out a powerful sword chi to collide with a huge sword formed by tens of thousands of arrows. When the two collided, a violent boom resounded through the sky. It was like a bolt from the blue. The sound was terrifying. The powerful ripples of energy formed a multicolored cloud that rapidly spread out in all directions. Countless soldiers below were blown away by the shockwave formed by the shockwave. They immediately spat out blood and were heavily injured. There were even quite a few soldiers who were enveloped by the shockwave that directly shattered their internal organs, dying an unnatural death. In a battle between Heaven Saint Masters, just the shockwave from the battle was enough to kill a large number of people. If they were too close, even Earth Saint Masters would find it difficult to protect themselves. The fortress of the kingdom of Pingyang was blown over by the shockwave. A 300-meter long wall was blown over, burying a large number of soldiers. Even the surrounding walls began to shake as they were heavily damaged. The combined attack of 5 Heaven Saint Masters was just too powerful. Even Jian Chen's huge sword, which was tens of meters long, was shattered by the combined attack of the 4 Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom. A moment later, the violent shock wave finally dissipated. Jianchen hovered in the air with only the middle part of Changyang, whose body still in his arms. His face was terrifyingly gloomy. On the other side, the 4 Heaven Saint Masters of the kingdom of Pingyang had also arrived 100 meters away from Jianchen. They hovered in the air and stared at Jianchen with sharp gazes. However, when they saw Jianchen's appearance that was at most in his 20s, they were all shocked. Their faces were filled with disbelief because Jianchen's age was just too young. The 4 Heaven Saint Masters did not believe that someone could reach such a level at such a young age. One of them coldly snorted, "Humph! Most likely he used the special envoy's medicine to rejuvenate himself." Hearing this, the other 3 Heaven Saint Masters were also convinced. Then an old man stared at Jianchen with a sharp gaze and sternly shouted, "Who are you? State your name." "Who cut off my big brother's 4 limbs." Jianchen stared at the 4 Heaven Saint Masters with a gloomy face and asked in a deep voice, What? Your big brother? The four Heaven Saint Masters were all extremely shocked. The Changyang who in Jianshan's arms was the person whose 4 limbs had been cut off. In that case, was Changyang who not the big brother of this Heaven Saint Master in front of them? This result caused the 4 Heaven Saint Masters to be stunned. They thought they had misheard. Who cut off his 4 limbs? Jianshan continued to ask, his killing intent soaring. The 4 Heaven Saint Masters looked at each other. They were all curious about Jianshan's identity. Immediately, one of them asked, "Sir, just who are you? I don't think I've heard of someone like you." At this moment, another huge aura spread out from the distance. A fiery red dot of light flashed in the distant sky. It was like a meteor streaking across the sky, bringing with it a dazzling red light as it shot towards him. Not long after, the fiery red light stopped 500 meters away, revealing an old man wrapped in fire elemental energy. The person who had come wore a long azure robe and was extremely ordinary. His head of white hair was tied up into a bun on his head. His wrinkled old face was somewhat pale. The old man's gaze quickly swept around. When he saw Changyang, who in Jianshan's arms with his 4 limbs cut off, his face suddenly changed. His face was filled with grief as he cried out, "Young master!" The 4 Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom all stared at the old man with a serious expression. They all gritted their teeth, and one of them said in a deep voice, "Humph, Changwuji, you really did come. You killed 2 of our experts from the Pingyang Kingdom. Today, we will make you accompany them in death." Changwuji's eyes were instantly filled with killing intent. He stared at the 4 Heaven Saint Masters with an extremely sharp gaze and said furiously, "You actually cut off the young master's 4 limbs. Good, good, good. This old servant will accompany you to the end. Even if I have to sacrifice my life, I will still kill the 4 of you. Humph, arrogant. Even with your injured body, you still dare to say such big words." One of the Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom had a look of disdain. He then cupped his hands and said, "Senior Qianyin, please show yourself." His voice was vast and powerful, spreading far and wide. An old man in a white robe flew over from behind. In the end, he stood side by side with the 4 Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom. The old man had white hair and a ruddy complexion. He had the demeanor of a transcendent being. He gave off the feeling that he was an expert. "Qianyin, I never thought that your Qiangan Kingdom would also interfere in this matter. Don't tell me that your Qiangan Kingdom is also joining forces with the other 4 kingdoms to deal with my kingdom of Jesson?" Changwuji's expression became ugly. The current situation was getting worse and worse. If the Qiangan Kingdom was included, then it was equivalent to 5 kingdoms attacking the kingdom of Jesson. He was extremely clear about Qianyun's background. He was a member of the royal family of the Qiangan Kingdom. He cultivated in the forbidden grounds of the royal palace and had lived for over 400 years. He was already a 5th cycle Heaven Saint Master, infinitely close to the 6th cycle. He was extremely powerful and was the #1 expert of the Qiangan Kingdom. Qianyun's gaze swept past Changwuji before landing on the gloomy Jianshan. He asked softly, "Who is he?" The 4 Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom shook their heads and said, "We don't know who he is either. He should be related to the kingdom of Jesson." Qianyun stared deeply at Jianshan before shifting his gaze to Changwuji. He smiled faintly and said, "Brother Wuji, we haven't seen each other for 100 years. I never thought that your strength would be even greater than before. My Qiangan Kingdom did not interfere in this matter. I only came for the Heaven Tier battle skill." "You want my Heaven Tier battle skill?" Changwuji asked in a deep voice. "That's right. If Brother Wuji can teach me the Heaven Tier battle skill, Qianyun will immediately retreat." Qianyun said with a smile, "Humph, you sure have guts. The Heaven Tier battle skill was taught to me by my master. You actually dare to ask me for it. Aren't you afraid that my master will come back one day and flatten your Qiangan Kingdom?" Chang Wuji's expression was extremely ugly. Qian Yun's face revealed a trace of fear, but he quickly hid it and laughed. Chang Wuji, you are still thinking about your master who has been missing for dozens of years. That's right, Ancestor Changyang is indeed very strong. However, you may have forgotten that when he went missing, his lifespan had already reached 900 years. He was almost at the end of his lifespan. Now that there has been no news of him for dozens of years, I'm afraid he has already died. My master is a genius. His battle prowess is unparalleled in the same realm. How can he be stopped by the mysteries of heaven and earth? When he returns one day, he will definitely flatten your Pingyang kingdom. Chang Wuji furiously shouted. Qian Yun sneered. Chang Wuji, I, Qian Yun, am not someone who can be scared. I will still say the same thing. If you teach me the heaven tier battle skill, I, Qian Yun, will immediately retreat. Don't even think about it. Although this old servant is already heavily injured, killing you all is not a problem. Chang Wuji's body surged out. Although he was heavily injured, his battle intent was high. He was like a fierce tiger, without the slightest trace of fear. On the other side, the 5 Heaven Saint Masters were all prepared for battle. Their sharp eyes stared at Chang Wuji and Jianqin. The battle was about to begin. At this moment, a cold voice suddenly sounded. Leave them to me. Today, I will flatten the Pingyang kingdom. I will take the heads of all the experts and hang them on the city walls. The one who spoke was Jianqin. Although his tone was calm, the intense killing intent within was not concealed. The content was even more shocking. Flatten the Pingyang kingdom. Take the heads of all the experts and hang them on the city walls. These words had a huge impact on the hearts of the 4 Heaven Saint Masters of the Pingyang kingdom. They were all furious. Their sharp eyes stared at Jianqin, emitting a powerful killing intent. One of the Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang kingdom shouted, Ignorant brat, do you really think you are the Changyang ancestor? You want to flatten my Pingyang kingdom with just the strength of a Heaven Saint Master? Chang Wuji also looked at Jianqin in surprise. Seeing Changyang who in Jianqin's arms, a trace of doubt appeared on his face. He did not know what kind of relationship this young expert had with Changyang Hu. He was actually willing to risk offending several Heaven Saint Masters to save Changyang Hu. Chapter 402. As he spoke, the unconscious Changyang Hu in Jianqin's arms was wrapped in a layer of gentle wind elemental energy and gently brought to Chang Wuji's side. The violent fire elemental energy around Chang Wuji became gentler, afraid of hurting Changyang Hu. He then gently embraced Changyang Hu in his arms as tears glistened in his old eyes. Young master, it's all my fault. Chang Wuji's lips trembled as he spoke. All of this was because he had used a heaven tier battle skill to kill 2 Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang kingdom. That was why the Pingyang kingdom held a grudge against him and used Changyang Hu to take revenge. Now that Changyang Hu had ended up like this, Chang Wuji's heart ached. He had watched Changyang Hu grow up. Although they were master and servant, their relationship was closer than family. Now that Changyang Hu had become a cripple, Chang Wuji did not know how much pain Changyang Ba would feel when he saw his son like this. Chang Wuji's gaze landed on Jianqin again. He suppressed his sorrow and said calmly, May I know your name? If there is a chance in the future, the Changyang Prefecture will definitely be grateful for your kindness. Jianqin did not reply, although seeing Chang Bo, who had cared for him in the past, was something to be happy about. Because of the tragedy of his brother, Changyang Hu, Jianqin could not feel happy at all. Instead, he felt so sad that he did not even have the mood to speak. Jianqin glared at the 5 Heaven Saint Masters across from him. His killing intent soared into the sky as he said in a deep voice, People of the Qiangan Kingdom, do you really want to interfere? It's not too late to retreat. Although Jianqin's aura was extraordinary, Qian Yin was not afraid at all. He said indifferently, Old man is only here for the heaven class combat skill. As long as he can get it, it doesn't matter even if the Tiangong kingdom is dragged into this. After all, the kingdom of Jessen has no chance of surviving this crisis. Jianqin said solemnly, "All right, I will definitely destroy your Tiangong kingdom in the future." Arrogant, who do you think you are? Not only do you want to destroy the Pingyang kingdom, but you also want to destroy my Gangan kingdom. Gan Yun laughed instead of getting angry. He didn't take Jianqin's words seriously at all. Jianqin didn't say anything. An intense, purplish-green light flashed in his eyes. At this moment, his eyes had completely turned into a purplish-green color. They flickered with a demonic light and looked incomparably terrifying. Jianqin reached out with his right hand. Countless rocks around the city walls shot up, carrying with them a sword chi that blotted out the sky as they shot towards the 5 Heaven Saint Masters. The 5 Heaven Saint Masters didn't take this attack seriously at all. They all sneered and struck out with their palms. Surging energy shot out from their palms and pressed down on the countless rocks that were flying towards them. The countless rocks that carried with them a faint sword chi broke through the powerful attacks of the Heaven Saint Masters like a hot knife through butter. They shot towards the 5 Heaven Saint Masters like moths to a flame. The faces of the 5 Heaven Saint Masters changed. They immediately became serious. Qian Yun immediately said in a deep voice, "These things are strange. Be careful." After saying that, he took out his saint weapon. It was a long and thin sword. With a wave of his hand, a wave of sword chi shot out and struck the rocks with the sword chi. The rocks were pulverized on the spot, turning into dust that drifted down. The other Heaven Saint Masters didn't slow down either. They also took out their own saint weapons to cut down the rocks that were flying towards them. However, the rocks with the sword chi were just too dense. Many of the rocks broke through their blockade and hit their bodies, piercing through them. The Heaven Saint Masters were shocked. Only at this moment did they truly begin to take this seriously. Use Saint Force to protect yourself. A Heaven Saint Master from the Pingyang Kingdom immediately shouted. Immediately, a few dense multicolored lights were emitted from their bodies. The surging Saint Force instantly condensed into a barrier that protected their bodies. However, this was still unable to block the attacks of the sword chi. It could only slightly slow down their speed. The 5 Heaven Saint Masters knew that they couldn't continue like this. They all used their full strength, shattering the rocks around them. Then they all rushed towards Jianqin. Jianqin raised his hands high above his head. With a thought, countless scattered iron arrows floated up and gathered above his head. At the same time, all the trees within a 15-kilometer radius exploded. The sky was filled with wood shavings covering the sun. In the end, it condensed into a huge sword that was several hundred meters long above Jianqin's head. It pierced through the clouds. From afar, it looked like a towering pillar that supported the heavens. It emitted a hazy purple and green light. What is that? The 4 Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom and the 5 Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom all had a change of expression. Their eyes were filled with shock as they looked at the huge sword formed from countless rocks and wood shavings above Jianqin's head. The huge momentum shocked them so much that they couldn't help but stop. Is this a Heaven Tier battle skill? A Heaven Saint Master from the Pingyang Kingdom said with a serious expression. No, it doesn't have the pressure of a Heaven Tier battle skill. This isn't a Heaven Tier battle skill. Qianyin said with a deep voice. At this time, the huge sword floating above Jianqin's head rapidly shrank. In the end, it turned into a huge sword that was only 100 meters long. It was even more condensed. The countless rocks and wood shavings inside were all compressed together, forming a tight connection. The purple and green light around the huge sword also became stronger. Jianqin angrily roared. The huge sword floating above his head suddenly chopped down with an inconceivable speed, enveloping the 5 Heaven Saint Masters within. The 5 Heaven Saint Masters all had a serious expression. They all shouted loudly and simultaneously used high-level Earth-tier battle skills to resist. Boom! A violent explosion reverberated through the sky. The violent energy shockwave seemed to be able to tear the sky apart. It carried a destructive aura as it wreaked havoc in all directions. The ground trembled and collapsed. Huge cracks rapidly spread out in all directions, reaching a radius of 10 kilometers in just a short while. The 5 Heaven Saint Masters' faces instantly became pale. Their bodies were pushed back by the powerful shockwave. 2 of the weaker ones immediately spat out a few mouthfuls of blood. Jianqin was also pushed back by the powerful shockwave. It was very difficult for him to stabilize his body. The surrounding space was violently distorted, and the scenery was a blur. It was impossible to see clearly. Jianqin was pushed back a full kilometer before he could stabilize his body. He then spread out his spiritual sense, capturing the positions of the 5 people in front of him. With a thought, the surrounding fire element energy rapidly gathered. In the end, it condensed into 5 huge red swords in front of him. They emitted heaven-burning flames, and the terrifying heat seemed to evaporate the air. At this moment, the temperature of the world suddenly rose. Whoosh! 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 With 5 ear-piercing sounds, the 5 elemental swords turned into flashes of red light, shooting towards the 5 people in front of him with lightning speed. Qian Yan's eyes flashed. He immediately flew into the air, dodging the incoming elemental swords. His body then turned into a white blur, shooting towards Jianqin with lightning speed. The 4 Heaven Saint Masters below him were weaker, so they had no time to dodge. Without any other choice, they could only use their Earth-tier battle skills to collide with the incoming fire elemental swords. With a violent explosion, the 4 elemental swords shattered, turning into flames that filled the sky. In an instant, the 4 Heaven Saint Masters were drowned in flames. In the next moment, 4 miserable figures flew out from the sea of flames. Their bodies were protected by a barrier of Saint Force, so their injuries were not serious. Only their faces had become paler. However, the chests of the 2 weakest people had been blasted into a bloody mess. Large parts of their clothes had been burned away. Damn it, how can he be so strong? Just the fire elemental swords were enough to make us almost unable to resist. This is at least the battle prowess of a 5th cycle Heaven Saint Master. What the hell? He clearly used the wind elemental energy to fly. How can he control the fire elemental energy now? That brat is too strong. He is definitely a senior who has cultivated for a long time. Could he be the 2nd Changyang ancestor? His strength is actually so strong. As a Heaven Saint Master, the 5 of us are unable to resist him. The 4 Heaven Saint Masters of the Pingyang Kingdom were stunned by Jianqin's battle prowess. Even with the 4 of them and Qian Yun of the Qiangan Kingdom, they were unable to gain the slightest advantage. Qian Yun had already arrived in front of Jianqin. The sword in his hand carried a strong energy fluctuation as it pierced towards Jianqin's forehead. Jianqin sneered. An extremely pure azure sword qi instantly shot out from his right hand. Using only the strength of his body, he stabbed out with his sword to block Qian Yun's attack. The azure sword qi's origin energy was extremely pure. It was almost solid. When it came into contact with Qian Yun's sword, it actually effortlessly cut a 2-finger-sized hole in Qian Yun's sword. With his saint weapon damaged, Qian Yun suffered a heavy injury. He immediately spat out a mouthful of blood and looked at the sword in his hand in shock. His face was filled with disbelief. Jianqin's movements did not stop because of this. The azure sword spirit's origin energy stabbed out again. It easily broke through the layer of saint force around Qian Yun's body and stabbed towards Qian Yun's head. What kind of power is this? Qian Yun was shocked. He immediately tilted his body and dodged with all his strength. The azure sword spirit's origin energy almost brushed past Qian Yun's head. Although he managed to avoid a fatal blow, His left arm was cut off by the azure sword spirit's origin energy. Blood spurted out like a fountain falling from the sky. It was as weak as tofu. Qian Yun groaned. He endured the intense pain and immediately flew up. In the blink of an eye, he was 1,000 meters in the air. He then looked at the pure azure sword chi in Jianqin's hand in shock. He was completely shocked. What kind of power is this? It's so powerful that it can even destroy my saint weapon. Jianqin's eyes were gloomy. His body emitted a strong killing intent as he chased after Qianyin. P.S. Xiaoyao has seen everyone's concern and support in the review and comment section. I am very moved. Xiaoyao's update time is indeed unstable. I do not deny this. At the same time, I accept everyone's criticism. However, there are people who actually attacked the author's life. The words are very unpleasant and immoral. What kind of quality is this? I have already banned the people who scolded me. 2 days ago, because I needed time to prepare, I didn't dare to rashly write, so the update time was delayed. However, Xiaoyao made it all up. Even if it was delayed, he would make it up the next day. This chapter was the second chapter of the 14th. It was originally planned to be completed around 3 a.m., but in the end, it took until 4:30 a.m. to complete. Xiaoyao could only go to sleep after this chapter was finished. Chapter 403. Seeing Jianqin chasing after him, Qianyun's expression changed. Jianqin had destroyed his saint weapon in one strike, and he had already lost the courage to fight. He no longer dared to stay behind and fled with all his might. Jianqin coldly looked at the fleeing Qianyun and did not continue to chase. He said in a deep voice, "I will spare your life today, but in the future, I will let you witness the destruction of the Qiangan kingdom with your own eyes. I will let you know the consequences of interfering in this matter." Hearing this, Qianyun's body could not help but tremble. Previously, he had disdained Jianqin's words, but now that he knew of Jianqin's strength, he did not doubt that Jianqin had the ability to destroy the Qiangan kingdom. In order to destroy a kingdom, it was not necessary to kill everyone in the kingdom. As long as the upper echelons of the kingdom were killed, the kingdom would only exist in name. Jianqin had fought 5 Heaven Saint Masters alone and had even gained the upper hand. With such strength, even if all the Heaven Saint Masters of the Qiangan kingdom worked together, they would not be able to stop him. At this moment, Qianyun's heart was filled with regret. If he had known that Jianqin had such strength, he would not have interfered in this matter no matter what. This matter has nothing to do with my Qiangan kingdom. If you have any enmity, feel free to find me, Qianyin. Do not implicate the innocent. Qianyun's body did not slow down at all as he left behind a weak voice that could be heard from afar. Chang Wuji, who had not left yet, stared at Jianqin's extremely young face in shock. His old face was also filled with shock. Although the 4 Heaven Saint Masters of the Pingyang Kingdom were not that strong, Qianyin was definitely a terrifying opponent. His strength had already reached the 5th cycle of Heaven Saint Master, infinitely close to the 6th cycle. Even if he wanted to defeat him, he would need to spend a lot of effort. However, he never thought that this seemingly young man would be able to cut off Qianyun's left arm so easily, causing him to flee in fear. Who is he? I have never seen such a young Heaven Saint Master. But why do I feel a sense of familiarity from him? Chang Wuji was filled with doubt as he constantly asked himself. Possessing such great strength at such a young age made him extremely curious about Jianqin's identity. Chang Wuji did not leave. The 4 Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom had cut off all 4 of Changyanghu's limbs, and this enmity was irreconcilable. If he did not take the heads of the 4 Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom today, he would not have the face to return. Seeing Qianyun's escape, the 4 Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom paled. Qianyun was the strongest among them. Now that he had left, the 4 of them would have no way of stopping the powerful young man before them. At this moment, Jianqin charged toward the 4 of them with the origin energy of the sword spirits. He swung his sword at their heads, mercilessly. The four Heaven Saint Masters did not discover the strength of the sword spirits. They used their earth-tier battle skills once more and slashed at Jianqin. Right now, they could only give it their all. A high-level earth-tier battle skill was the strongest battle skill they had. Jianqin's face was filled with disdain as he stabbed out 4 times with the origin energy of the sword qi. When the two attacks collided, the saint weapons of the 4 Heaven Saint Masters exploded with powerful energy, forming a violent shockwave that swept out in all directions. The 5 Heaven Saint Masters were constantly pushed back. When Heaven Saint Masters battled, every attack had the power to shatter mountains. Just as the two sides collided, the 4 Heaven Saint Masters all spat out a mouthful of blood. Their faces instantly became as pale as paper, without a single trace of blood. Their faces were filled with shock. The saint weapons in their hands had all been cut open by the origin energy of the sword spirits. No, impossible. We are all Heaven Saint Masters. How can you damage our saint weapons? One of the Heaven Saint Masters involuntarily cried out in shock. The other 3 Heaven Saint Masters were also filled with disbelief. Jianqin remained silent. His face was cold, but the killing intent in his cold eyes became more and more powerful, causing people to shiver. Afterward, the wind elemental energy around him became more and more powerful. It actually carried his body into the violent shockwaves of energy, forcing him toward the 4 Heaven Saint Masters who had already retreated 30 meters away. The origin energy of the azure and violet sword qi slashed out once again. It was extremely fast, and only a flash of azure and violet light could be seen, making it difficult to capture. The 2 most heavily injured Heaven Saint Masters were no longer at their peak condition. Their heads had been cut off, but they did not die. They stared at Jianqin in shock. Afterward, a layer of elemental energy wrapped around their heads and sent them flying into the sky. Jianqin used the wind element to catch up to the 2 fleeing Heaven Saint Masters in the blink of an eye. His left hand struck out with lightning-like speed, striking the 2 heads. The great force dispersed their souls on the spot, wiping them out. Heaven Saint Masters were not as weak as Earth Saint Masters. They could control the force of the world, so their souls were extremely powerful. To kill a Heaven Saint Master, their souls had to be destroyed. The 2 headless bodies powerlessly fell from the sky. Blood spurted from their necks, dyeing the sky red. The 2 heads that Jianqin had dispersed also fell from the sky. The death of the 2 Heaven Saint Masters had an extremely great impact on the 2 remaining Heaven Saint Masters. They stared at Jianqin in extreme shock. Their faces were filled with fear, and they had already decided to retire. Less than 10 minutes had passed since the start of the battle. In such a short amount of time, a 5th cycle Heaven Saint Master had fled in fear, and 2 Heaven Saint Masters had died while his opponent was completely unscathed. Such battle prowess made the 2 remaining Heaven Saint Masters shiver. Their hearts were filled with fear. After killing the 2 Heaven Saint Masters, Jianqin did not stop at all. He continued to charge toward the 2 remaining Heaven Saint Masters with the azure and violet sword spirits in his hand. The 2 remaining Heaven Saint Masters were already heavily injured. Seeing Jianqin charge over, their faces changed drastically. They immediately yelled out, "Run!" Before they had even finished speaking, the 2 of them scattered and fled. They had lost the courage to fight. Jianqin coldly snorted and immediately chased after the person closest to him. With the wind element, he was twice as fast as the 2 of them. He caught up to one of them effortlessly. With a wave of his right hand, the origin energy of the azure and violet sword spirits mercilessly chopped at his head. The Heaven Saint Master suddenly turned around. The saint weapon in his hand pulsed with energy as he instantly used a high-level Earth tier battle skill to attack Jianqin. When the 2 collided, the energy of the Earth tier battle skill immediately exploded. The Heaven Saint Master used this opportunity to retreat. A two-finger-sized hole had appeared on his saint weapon. Blood violently spurted from his mouth. He had become extremely weak from the repeated injuries. At this moment, there was a flash of azure and violet light. As soon as Genshin's first strike had been launched, the second strike followed. It was extremely fast, and just as the Heaven Saint Master was about to retreat from Genshin's attack range, his neck had been severed by the origin energy of the azure and violet sword spirits. He was as weak as tofu. Genshin quickly rushed forward and struck out with his left hand. He viciously struck the fleeing Heaven Saint Master's head, dispersing his soul on the spot. Soon after, Genshin withdrew the origin energy from the sword spirits. He pointed behind him with his right hand, and the blood in the air rapidly condensed in front of his finger before turning into a blood-red sword. It shot toward the last Heaven Saint Master with lightning-like speed as it radiated an azure-colored sword chi. The last Heaven Saint Master was caught off guard. The blood-red sword pierced through his back and through his chest. He immediately let out a miserable cry, but before he could even finish his cry, the space in front of him became fiery red. A sword of fire rapidly condensed in front of him, burning with scorching flames. The intense heat seemed to be able to evaporate even the air. Oh no! The Heaven Saint Master paled in fright. He immediately swung his saint weapon and dispersed the sword of fire. The explosion engulfed him, but he never thought that another sword of fire would silently condense behind him. It easily beheaded him while he was caught off guard. Genshin beckoned with his hand, and an iron arrow turned into a black streak of light that shot over from afar. It pierced through the Heaven Saint Master's head, causing a spray of blood to spurt out. At this point, the 4 Heaven Saint Masters of the Pingyang Kingdom had all died in battle. The sounds of the battle gradually calmed down, and the world fell into an eerie silence. Below Genshin's feet, hundreds of thousands of soldiers lay scattered on the ground. Mountains of corpses and seas of blood covered the ground. The entire ground was bright red, and a thick smell of blood permeated the air. It was extremely pungent and nauseating. Chang Wuji stared blankly at Genshin, who was floating in the air. The shock in his heart could no longer be described with words. It had only been a short while, and the 4 Heaven Saint Masters had all been killed. Moreover, the powerful young man had not been injured at all. This was just too shocking. At this moment, 4 heads slowly rose from the ground and floated in front of Chang Wuji. Then let them hang on the walls. Genshin said expressionlessly. Although he had killed 4 Heaven Saint Masters and avenged his brother, he was not happy at all. Thank you for your help, sir. Chang Wuji's voice trembled. He was extremely emotional. If such a mysterious expert stood on the side of the Kingdom of Jessin, then the overall strength of the Kingdom of Jessin would definitely rise by several levels. Genshin remained silent. He coldly stared at the fortress in front of him. He slowly clenched his hand, and the collapsed ruins of the wall immediately began to shake violently. A 50-meter-long section of the wall slowly floated into the air, surrounded by a faint layer of light. Under the control of Genshin's mind, it continuously rammed into the fortress. Boom! 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 Dense sounds were transmitted, and the entire ground was trembling violently. The earth quaked, and the mountain swayed as if there was an earthquake. The 50-meter-long section of the wall under Genshin's control slammed into the fortress again and again, causing the sturdy fortress to be riddled with holes. In just a short moment, the majestic fortress that resembled a creeping dragon completely collapsed and ceased to exist. Chapter 404. The fortress that had guarded the borders of the Pingyang Kingdom for countless years and had weathered countless storms was destroyed by Genshin just like that. After the fortress collapsed, the more than 1 million soldiers that were hidden behind it appeared in Genshin's line of sight. At this moment, all of the soldiers' expressions were sluggish. Many of them even had deep fear in their eyes as they looked at Jianqin, who was floating in the air with fear. The fortress that protected the Pingyang kingdom had collapsed and turned into ruins. The 4 powerful Heaven Saint Masters had all fallen. After experiencing this tragedy, the strength of the Pingyang kingdom was greatly reduced, especially the 4 Heaven Saint Masters. This was an irrecoverable loss. Moreover, this was a huge blow to the morale of the soldiers. Heaven Saint Masters were the pillars of strength in every kingdom in this region. They represented the prosperity and status of the kingdom. Especially in times of war, they were the biggest pillar in the hearts of millions of soldiers. They were the faith of millions of soldiers. Their deaths made the millions of soldiers of the Pingyang kingdom feel as if they had lost their souls. They no longer had the slightest desire to fight. Jianqin coldly glanced at the 1 million soldiers behind the fortress. He then soared into the sky and flew towards the center of the Pingyang kingdom. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared into the horizon. Chang Wuji watched as Jianqin left. When he saw the direction Jianqin was heading, his body couldn't help but tremble slightly. He muttered, "Where is he going?" Looking at the direction he's heading towards the royal palace of the Pingyang kingdom. Is he going to wreak havoc in the royal palace? Jianqin flew as fast as he could. His entire body was wrapped in a thick layer of wind element. He flew over mountains and ridges, passing through cities of various sizes. He flew as fast as lightning towards the royal palace of the Pingyang kingdom. The royal palace of the Pingyang kingdom was more than 7,000 kilometers away from the fortress. Even if Jianqin flew at full speed, it would still take him 4 to 6 hours to reach the royal palace. 2 hours after Jianqin left, in the northern fortress of the kingdom of Jessen, the million soldiers of the Pingyang kingdom were neatly lined up 10 kilometers away. It was just outside the range of the intermediate magic crystal cannons. At this moment, the million soldiers had already assembled. They only needed to give the order, and they could attack the fortress at any time. On the other hand, the Jessen kingdom's fortress, which was over 80 meters tall, was in shambles. Many parts of it had collapsed, making it impossible for the soldiers on the walls to pass through. At the entrance of the fortress, the half-meter thick gate that was completely made of refined steel had also become uneven. It was in ruins and it was covered in holes. It was so damaged that it couldn't even open normally. In one of the towers on the fortress wall, a few generals in helmets and armors gathered together. They all looked haggard and their faces were yellow. They didn't look very good. It seems that the kingdom of Jessen is doomed this time. The enemy has already gathered 1 million soldiers, and they can attack us at any time. Moreover, there are still 2 million soldiers resting at the fortress of the Pingyang kingdom. It's impossible for us to defend against the enemy with just over 800,000 injured soldiers. An old man in armor sighed and said with a heavy face, "Now, the 50 intermediate magic crystal cannons and 200 beginner magic crystal cannons in the northern fortress are almost all useless. If we continue to use them, they will explode at any time. Moreover, we don't have many magic cores left. We won't be able to hold on for long." A general with a bandage wrapped around his right arm said, listlessly, "Let's hold on for as long as we can. Even if we die, we won't let them have it easy." The one who spoke was a middle-aged man in armor. His face was gloomy and his eyes were filled with murderous intent. Looking at the expression on the middle-aged man's face, a general in armor beside him sighed and said, "Changyang, I know that your son has been captured by the Pingyang kingdom. You must be very upset. But don't worry, the Wuji Senior is very powerful. He will definitely save Changyang. A sliver of sorrow flashed through Changyang's eyes as he bitterly said, "It's said that whose limbs have already been chopped off. He's reduced to a cripple who can't even take care of himself. Even if we save him, it'll only make him suffer more." Hearing this, the generals sitting around sighed. Although a powerful radiant Saint Master could regenerate a person's severed limbs, Radiant Saint Masters with this ability were as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns in the Tianyuan continent. Not only were they difficult to find, even if they were found, the Changyang Prefecture would not be able to invite them. It could be said that Changyang, who would never be able to recover in this lifetime. Changyang Ba, don't forget that you still have a talented fourth son, Changyang Shoten. Changyang Shoten condensed a saint weapon at the age of 15. With his talent, his strength will definitely increase a lot when he returns. He might not be any weaker than his elder brother, Changyang Hu. A few middle-aged men in armor comforted him. These people were all from the 4 great clans of Lore City. They were all on very good terms with the Changyang Prefecture. When he heard about his fourth son, Changyang Shoten, Changyang Ba sighed inside. A few years ago, because of the Huayun sect's power, his youngest son had been forced to leave home at the age of 15. It had already been several years since then, and there had been no news of him at all. Even now, Changyang Ba did not know whether his fourth son, Changyang Shoten, was still alive or not. At this moment, a young man in light armor walked in with large strides. He smiled and said, "Gentlemen, I just heard you mention something about Changyang Shoten. Can you tell me more about this Changyang Shoten? He condensed a saint weapon at the age of 15, 3 years faster than me. How amazing! I'm also very curious about this genius." When they saw the young man walk in, the generals all stood up and enthusiastically greeted him. "Little friend Ming Dong, since you're interested in this matter, let me tell you the whole story," an armor man in armor said with a smile. He then explained everything about Changyang Shoten in detail, including how great Changyang Shoten's talent was. When he first became a saint, he was able to defeat several saints and a great saint. He was highly regarded by the king, and in the end, Changyang Shoten was forced to leave home because of the Huayun sect's power. Changyang Shoten was only 15 when he left. Now that several years have passed, I don't know where he is. If he had stayed in the kingdom of Jessen, his achievements would not be any weaker than his elder brothers. Perhaps he would already be a great saint master. The armored old man sighed. "The Huayun sect," the armored young man murmured. A vicious light flashed through his eyes, but it disappeared very quickly. He smiled faintly. "Don't worry, patriarch of the Changyang clan. Your son will definitely return safely." Changyang Ba let out a long sigh. His face was gloomy. "That's no longer important. In just a few days, my Changyang Prefecture will cease to exist. Even if he comes back, what's the point? He'll only be buried here. If Xiang Aurelia is still alive, I hope he doesn't come back. At the very least, he won't be caught in the crossfire." "He won't. Don't worry, patriarch of the Changyang clan. I will definitely do my best to protect Changyang Prefecture. If it really doesn't work, I'll go ask my uncle Tian to help," the young man said solemnly. He was extremely serious. Everyone's eyes lit up when they heard that the young man had an uncle. Someone immediately asked, "Ming Dong, is your uncle Tian very powerful?" "I'm not sure about that either. However, if my uncle Tian is willing to take action, stopping this war will definitely not be a problem. Don't look at me like that. I've already begged my uncle Tian a few times before, but he's not willing to interfere at all," said the young man. Hearing this, everyone's faces were filled with disappointment. At this moment, an azure-robed old man walked in from outside. His face was filled with sorrow. Changyang Ba's eyes immediately lit up when he saw the old man walk in. He immediately arrived before the old man and asked nervously, "Chang Bo, you finally returned. How is Ahu? Has he been saved?" Chang Wuji let out a long sigh and said sorrowfully, "Patriarch, the first young master has been successfully saved. He's not in any danger for now, but in the future, sigh." Changyang Ba's face immediately froze. At that moment, he seemed to have become much paler. Out of his 4 children, only his eldest and fourth had some talent for cultivation. His fourth son's fate was unknown, while his eldest son had become a cripple. Now, Changyang could not find a single capable man other than his third son who had no talent for cultivation at all. After a long while, Changyang finally calmed down. He sighed at the sky and said softly, "It's fine as long as he's alive. Let's talk about the future in the future." Chang Wuji also remained silent. He was dispirited. How could he not understand Changyang's feelings? He was also heartbroken that Changyang, who had ended up in such a miserable state. After all, he had watched him grow up. Although he was not a relative, he was more than a relative. None of the people in the tower said anything. They were all in a heavy mood. The kingdom of Jessin was facing such a tragic situation that could not be changed. Soon they would all die on the battlefield and be buried here. After a long while, Chang Wuji suppressed the sorrow in his heart and said, "Patriarch, there's a piece of good news that I should tell everyone. When I went to save the first young master, I encountered a mysterious young expert. He killed all 4 Heaven Saint Masters guarding the fortress of the kingdom of Pingyang. He even destroyed the border fortress of the kingdom of Pingyang." Hearing this, the armored people in the tower turned pale with fright. They looked at Chang Wuji in disbelief. An old man immediately asked, "Senior Wuji, what did you say?" "For Heaven Saint Masters of the kingdom of Pingyang were killed by a mysterious young expert. Is this true?" Chang Wuji waved his hand and took out 4 bloody heads from his space ring. He placed them on the table one by one. Looking at the 4 heads on the table, everyone's expression suddenly became sluggish. Their faces were filled with disbelief. Mingdong's eyes also flashed. He asked, "Senior Wuji, what's the name of the person who killed the 4 Heaven Saint Masters?" "I don't know either. When I arrived, the first young master had already been saved by him. It seems like he has an extraordinary relationship with the first young master," Chang Wuji said with a hint of confusion. Hearing this, Mingdong's face became thoughtful. His eyes flashed. Afterward, Chang Wuji hung the heads of the 4 Heaven Saint Masters high on the walls of the fortress. This greatly increased the morale of the troops. Cheers could be heard everywhere. Not long after, 2 furious roars came from the front. 2 dots of light, one red and one yellow, appeared in the distant sky. They quickly shot toward the fortress of the kingdom of Jessin. A powerful aura filled the air, making it difficult for the soldiers below to breathe. Chapter 405. Not long after, 2 furious roars could be heard from the front. A red and a yellow dot of light appeared in the distant sky, rapidly flying toward the kingdom of Jessin's fort. A powerful aura filled the air, causing the soldiers below to have difficulty breathing. The 2 Heaven Saint Masters from the kingdom of Pingyang, who were stationed at the front lines, received the news and were furious. Chang Wuji stepped forward and stopped the 2 Heaven Saint Masters from the kingdom of Pingyang 3 kilometers away from the fort. At the same time, another powerful aura rushed out from the kingdom of Jessin's fort. A Heaven Saint Master from the kingdom of Jessin flew over from behind and stood shoulder to shoulder with Chang Wuji. The person who came was also an old man wearing a white robe. His face was pale and his hair was messy. He looked quite haggard. He was the principal of the kingdom of Jessin's Karga's Academy, Kafir. The 2 Heaven Saint Masters from the kingdom of Pingyang looked at the 4 heads hanging on the walls of the kingdom of Jessin with anger. They were so angry that their bodies trembled. First, Chang Wuji had killed 2 Heaven Saint Masters from the kingdom of Pingyang. Now, 4 Heaven Saint Masters had died, resulting in the death of 6 peak experts from the kingdom of Pingyang. This loss was just too great, and it was not something they could accept. The 4 were enemies, and when they saw each other, their eyes blazed with hatred. Without saying a single word, they began to fight. Surging waves of energy wreaked havoc in the sky, causing the already dilapidated walls of the kingdom of Jessin to tremble. Chang Wuji and Kafir had gone through many battles before, and now they were both injured. Their strength was not even at 50% of their peak. The two sides only fought for a short while before Kaffir's chest was pierced by his opponent's sword. Violent Saint Force entered his body, immediately shattering his organs. Kaffir, stand down. I'll deal with them. Chang Wuji roared angrily, a resolute look flashing in his eyes. Suddenly his battle strength increased threefold, and he knocked back his opponent with a single blow. Then he rushed towards Kaffir's opponent, blocking both of them by himself. Although Chang Wuji had not fully recovered from his injuries, his current battle prowess was even greater than when he was at his peak. Not only did he stop the two Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom, he even gained the upper hand. He must be using some kind of secret technique. He won't be able to hold on for long. We must hold on. The two Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom were also very experienced people, so they immediately explained Chang Wuji's current situation. Chang Wuji didn't say a word. He knew that he wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer, so he decided to attack with all his might. After a few dozen exchanges, one of the Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom was blown away by Chang Wuji's Earth Tier battle skill, causing the pressure on the remaining Heaven Saint Master to increase greatly. Kaffir's face was deathly pale as he stood on the city wall, nervously looking at Chang Wuji. Right now, his internal organs had been completely shattered, and he had almost lost the ability to fight. Although he was unwilling, he could only stand here and watch the battle, unable to interfere. Dean, quickly go and treat your injuries. A middle-aged man came to Kaffir's side, his face filled with concern. This person was the Vice Dean of the Kargath Academy, Bayan. Kaffir shook his head, saying, "My injuries are too severe. The Radiant Saint Masters from the Northern Fort are unable to heal me at all. Furthermore, they have been greatly exhausted these past few days, so they no longer have the energy to condense Radiant Saint Force." Dean, don't worry. Senior Wuji's strength is extraordinary. He will definitely be able to repel the experts from the Pingyang Kingdom. Bayan comforted. Kaffir shook his head, saying, "His situation isn't much better than mine. Our kingdom of Jessen's Radiant Saint Masters are scattered in the 4 forts. In terms of numbers, we can't compare to the 4 allied armies. He still hasn't recovered from his injuries a few days ago. Even if he can temporarily injure the 2 experts from the Pingyang Kingdom, it won't be of any use. They have gathered all the Radiant Saint Masters from the kingdom of Jessen behind them. No matter how severe his injuries are, he will be able to recover very quickly, unless we can completely kill them." The first form of the 3 styles of the Berserk Python. A loud shout came from the front. Chang Wuji's body burned with intense Saint Force as he raised his Saint weapon high into the air. An extremely powerful pressure suddenly appeared between heaven and earth, tightly binding his opponent in the air and hindering their movements. Wind and clouds surged between the heavens and the earth. Fierce gales wreaked havoc between the heavens and the earth, blowing up the sand and stones on the ground. Smoke and dust filled the sky, covering the sun and the sky. The entire sky appeared gray, as if the end of the world had arrived. He's using a Heaven Tier battle skill. Quickly retreat. The 2 Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom turned pale with fright as they cried out in alarm, quickly retreating to the back. Unfortunately, only one of them was able to escape. The other was locked in place by the pressure of the Heaven Tier battle skill and was forcibly bound in the air, unable to escape at all. The Heaven Tier battle skill was quickly completed. With a loud shout, Chang Wuji swung the huge sword in his hand with enough power to destroy heaven and earth. Under the shocked gaze of the Heaven Saint Master, the sword slashed through his head and his entire body was cleaved in 2, dyeing the sky with blood. However, the remaining power of the heaven-ranked battle skill did not diminish in the slightest. A dazzling ray of light pierced through the sky and fiercely bombarded the ground below. Suddenly, the earth trembled and the mountains shook. The remaining power of the heaven-ranked battle skill created a 10-mile-long trench on the ground. Thousands of soldiers from the Pingyang Kingdom who were a few miles away, were affected and died under the remaining power of the heaven-ranked battle skill. After using the heaven-tier battle skill, Chang Wuji's body shook violently, almost unable to control himself, and fell from the sky. His originally pale face was now completely devoid of blood, looking sickly. The remaining Heaven Saint Master from the Pingyang Kingdom had an extremely ugly expression. In this battle, his Pingyang Kingdom had suffered the greatest losses. Right now, they had already lost 7 peak experts. Even if the Pingyang Kingdom could win this battle, their status would not be as good as before. At this moment, a few powerful auras came from afar. A few peak experts, surrounded by elemental energy, were flying over. Pingyang Kingdom, our Hidden Dragon Kingdom, has come to assist you in taking the northern part of the city. Before they arrived, an old voice rang out, full of vigor. As soon as they heard the identity of the people who had come, the expressions of the soldiers of the Kingdom of Jessen changed drastically. Their faces were ashen and their eyes were filled with despair. The principal of the Kargath Academy, who stood on the city walls, also let out a long sigh. He murmured, "The heavens have destroyed our Kingdom of Jessen." Chang Wuji's expression was ugly. Looking at the 4 Heaven Saint Masters rapidly approaching from afar, his face was also filled with despair. He then sighed inwardly and flew back to the walls of the Kingdom of Jessen with a gloomy expression. In the northern fortress of the Kingdom of Jessen, there were only 2 Heaven Saint Masters, him and the principal of the Kargath Academy, guarding it. Now that the 2 of them had lost the ability to fight, there was no way they could deal with 5 Heaven Saint Masters working together. Very soon, the Heaven Saint Masters of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom and the Pingyang Kingdom gathered together. The surviving Heaven Saint Master of the Pingyang Kingdom looked at the powerful reinforcements with joy. He said, "Has your Hidden Dragon Kingdom already taken the western fortress of the Kingdom of Jessen?" An old man from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom immediately laughed and said, "That's right. The western fortress of the Kingdom of Jessen has already been taken by our Hidden Dragon Kingdom. Of the 3 peak experts of the Kingdom of Jessen, 2 are dead and 1 has fled. Right now, our army is marching towards the imperial city of the Kingdom of Jessen. We heard that there was some trouble at the northern fortress, so the 4 of us immediately rushed over to help. I believe that before long, reinforcements from the Blue Wind Kingdom will arrive as well." The old man from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom spoke very loudly. His voice could be heard throughout the entire fortress of the Kingdom of Jessen. He purposely used this to attack the morale of the Kingdom of Jessen. As expected, after hearing this, the soldiers of the Kingdom of Jessen all lost their courage to fight. Many of them sat on the ground with pale faces. They had lost all will to fight. Some of the soldiers even began to take off their armor, preparing to surrender. Kingdom of Jessen, surrender. Those who surrender will be spared. An old man from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom hovered in the air and looked down at the soldiers below. The Kingdom of Jessen has no soldiers who surrender. We would rather die than become slaves. An old general standing on the wall shouted. He did not fear death at all. "You're courting death." A cold light flashed through the eyes of the old man from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom. With a wave of his hand, a yellow elemental sword condensed in the air and shot towards the old general with lightning speed. Boom! The yellow elemental sword exploded in the old general's body, leaving him completely unharmed. "Old General Ling! Old General Ling!" The surrounding generals all cried out in grief, their faces filled with sorrow. Chang Wuji and Kafir both sighed. The 2 of them looked at each other, and a trace of determination appeared in their eyes. They slowly floated into the air and faced off against the 5 Heaven Saint Masters. They would rather die on the battlefield than live an ignoble existence under someone else. The Heaven Saint Master from the Pingyang Kingdom hated the 2 of them to the extreme. He angrily shouted, "Chang Wuji, Kafir, since the 2 of you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. Everyone, let's attack together and completely annihilate them. That's fine. I heard that Chang Wuji has grasped a heaven-tier battle skill. To prevent any accidents from happening, let's all attack together, an old man from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom said. Soon after, the 5 Heaven Saint Masters charged towards Chang Wuji and Kafir, their killing intent soaring. Chang Wuji and Kafir were expressionless. They had already prepared themselves to be buried here. At this crucial moment, suddenly, several powerful auras appeared in the distance. From the horizon, 5 more Heaven Saint Masters radiated with the light of elemental energy as they flew over. The sudden appearance of these 5 people caused the Heaven Saint Masters from the Pingyang Kingdom and the Hidden Dragon Kingdom to involuntarily stop. They all hovered in the air as they watched the 5 rapidly approaching figures. Could it be that the Blue Wind Kingdom has broken through the eastern fort of the Kingdom of Jessen and is sending reinforcements? No, the reinforcements from the Blue Wind Kingdom can't be coming in that direction. The Heaven Saint Masters of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom discussed with one another. Their faces all became rather stern as they stared at the 5 experts who were rapidly approaching them. Very soon, the 5 Heaven Saint Masters stopped 100 meters away from the group. There were a total of 4 old men and 1 middle-aged man. The old man at the front held a snow-white magical beast in his arms. The magical beast opened its bright eyes and looked around curiously. The Heaven Saint Masters from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom all became serious. This was because the 5 Heaven Saint Masters that had suddenly arrived were all unfamiliar faces. They did not recognize a single one of them. They were not from this region at all. Chapter 406. The Heaven Saint Masters from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom glanced at each other. They did not know whether these people were friends or foes, or if they were just passers-by. We are from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom. May I ask who you are? A Heaven Saint Master from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom cupped his hands and asked. His tone was extremely polite because he could already feel the strength of these people. We are from the Qin Empire. The one who spoke was a middle-aged man standing at the back. The Qin Empire? The people from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom were all stunned, and their expressions were filled with confusion. This was because there wasn't a single Qinhuang kingdom in the vicinity. Suddenly, an old man from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom seemed to have thought of something. His expression immediately changed as he looked at the 5 people in front of him in shock. He cried out in surprise, "The Qin Empire! Could it be the Qin Empire, one of the 8 great empires of the Tianyuan continent?" Hearing this, everyone's expression changed, including Chang Wuji and Kafir. Everyone looked at the 5 people who claimed to be from the Qin Empire in shock. On the Tianyuan continent, the 3 great empires were the strongest. They were the strongest empires standing at the peak of the Tianyuan continent. Every single one of them was terrifyingly powerful. Below the 3 great empires, there were 8 great empires. These 8 great empires were also extremely powerful, only second to the 3 great empires. The Qin Empire was one of the 8 great empires. Its strength was so great that it could easily sweep through all directions. It was one of the peak powers of the Tianyuan continent, an existence that stood at the top of the pyramid. The old man holding the snow-white little beast nodded and said, "Correct. We are the state teachers of the Qin Empire, one of the 8 great empires." After receiving confirmation, the 5 Heaven Saint Masters from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom and the Pingyang Kingdom immediately became respectful. Although they were all Heaven Saint Masters, the state teachers of the Qin Empire had a much higher status than them. As one of the 8 great empires of the Tianyuan continent, the state teachers of the Qin Empire were also very powerful. Those who could hold the position of state teacher were all people with outstanding talent. It was difficult for them to find an opponent in the same level of cultivation. Moreover, they all knew Heaven-tier battle skills. Their battle prowess was not something the Heaven Saint Masters of this region could compare to. After learning the identities of the 5 people, Even Changwuji and Kafir were surprised. They never thought that they would actually meet the state teachers of the Qin Empire, one of the 8 great empires of the 8 great empires. This was indeed an extremely rare occurrence. However, the state teachers of the Imperial Empire, the Kingdom of Jessin and the Hidden Dragon Kingdom, the Kingdom of Jessin and the Qin Empire. As one of the 8 great empires of the Tianyuan continent, the Qin Empire also had many vassal states. These vassal states were much stronger than the Kingdom of Jessin. It was not an exaggeration to say that, including the Kingdom of Jessin, the surrounding states did not even have the ability to become vassal states of the Qin Empire. The 4 Heaven Saint Masters of the Hidden Dragon Kingdom immediately greeted the 5 state teachers of the Qin Empire with smiles on their faces. Each one of them had a respectful attitude, hoping to use this rare opportunity to form a relationship with the state teachers of the Qin Empire. Once the 2 sides interacted, the benefits to them would be immeasurable. The Qin Huang Kingdom's leader coldly looked at everyone. Not even a single smile could be seen on his face. The old man carrying the snow-white little critter faintly glanced around and said, "Does that stronghold belong to the Jessin Kingdom?" Hearing this, everyone present was stunned. They did not know why the state teachers of the Qin Empire would ask such a question. Although they were filled with doubt, they did not dare to be careless. The Heaven Saint Master of the Pingyang Kingdom was the first to speak. "Correct. That is the northern border fort of the Kingdom of Jessin." "And who are you?" the old man holding the snow-white beast expressionlessly asked. "I am Xiong Baotai, a member of the Xiong family of the Pingyang Kingdom," the Heaven Saint Master of the Pingyang Kingdom said with a smile. The old man holding the snow-white beast immediately lost interest. In the end, his gaze calmly fell on the heavily injured and pale Changwuji and Kafir. He calmly said, "I presume you are from the Kingdom of Jessin." Changwuji and Kafir looked at each other. Their eyes were filled with doubt. They did not know why the state teachers of the Qin Empire would ask such a question. Moreover, as a small and remote country, the Kingdom of Jessin should not have caught the eye of the state teachers of the Qin Empire. Why were these state teachers of such high status beginning to care about such small matters? "Correct. We are from the Kingdom of Jessin." Changwuji opened his mouth. Although the Kingdom of Jessin was about to be destroyed, he did not want to offend the people of the Qin Empire. The old man holding the snow-white beast finally revealed a faint smile on his face. He said, "It seems that we are not late. The 5 of us have come under the orders of the Imperial Protector to assist the Kingdom of Jessin in fending off foreign enemies. If there is anything you need, please do not hesitate to ask." As soon as the state teacher of the Qin Empire finished speaking, everyone present was stunned. Their faces were filled with disbelief. However, the expressions of the 5 Heaven Saint Masters from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom and the Pingyang Kingdom changed drastically. In an instant, their faces became extremely ugly. None of them would have thought that the Kingdom of Jessin would have relations with the Qin Empire, one of the 8 great nations of the Tianyuan continent. Moreover, the Imperial Protector of the Qin Empire had specially sent 5 state teachers to assist them. This news was like a bolt from the blue to them, causing them to be stunned on the spot. They knew very well just how important the Imperial Protector was in a kingdom. Now that the Imperial Protector of the Qin Empire was standing behind the Kingdom of Jessin, even if the 4 nations attacked the Kingdom of Jessin, they could only obediently retreat in the end. This was because the strength of the Qin Huang Kingdom was not something they could provoke. Although the 4 nations had an army of over 20 million, and there were quite a few Heaven Saint Masters, the Qin Huang Kingdom would probably only need to send out 1 million elites to completely defeat them. Changwuji and Kafir were also stunned for a good while, unable to return to their senses for a long time. They both thought that they had misheard. These 5 state teachers of the Qin Empire had actually come to assist the Kingdom of Jessin against an external enemy, and they were even sent by the Imperial Protector of the Qin Empire. At this moment, the 2 of them were filled with doubts. Since when did the kingdom of Jessen have relations with one of the 8 great nations of the continent, the imperial protector of the Qin Empire? Let's go! The 4 Heaven Saint Masters from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom had already realized that the situation was not good. Immediately, one of them shouted and quickly retreated into the distance. The Heaven Saint Master from the Pingyang Kingdom did not hesitate and retreated with the 4 of them. The old man with the snow-white little critter in his arms signaled to the 4 people behind him. The 4 people behind him understood and immediately chased after the 5 Heaven Saint Masters. The faces of the Heaven Saint Masters changed drastically. Immediately, one of them lost his cool and asked, "State teachers, we have no enmity between us. Why are you chasing us so relentlessly?" His voice was filled with panic. The 4 state teachers of the Qin Empire did not say a word. Very soon, a great battle broke out between the 2 sides. The battle between the 9 Heaven Saint Masters was extremely spectacular. At this moment, they were in the air above the million-strong army of the Pingyang Kingdom. The violent shock waves of the battle spread below, causing the million-strong army of the Pingyang Kingdom to suffer heavy casualties. Those who could assume the position of state teacher of the Qin Empire were all elites, carefully selected from thousands of people. Their battle prowess was hard to find in the same level as them. Furthermore, they had many unique skills. As 3rd Cycle Heaven Saint Masters, they could easily suppress 4th Cycle Heaven Saint Masters. Even though it was 4 against 5, not only did they have the upper hand, they were also firmly suppressing the 5 of them. Chang Wuji and Kafir were dumbfounded at the scene unfolding before them. Even now, the 2 of them felt that this was just too unbelievable. It was as if they were dreaming. In this desperate situation, the kingdom of Jessen had actually obtained such powerful reinforcements. Moreover, the reinforcements were the imperial protector of the Qin Empire. On the walls of the kingdom of Jessen, countless ashen-faced generals and soldiers were reignited with fighting spirit. They all excitedly watched the battle unfold before them. There were even some generals who had tears of excitement in their eyes. At this moment, they could already see the dawn of victory. The battle at the front was extremely intense. Surging waves of energy wreaked havoc in the surroundings. The 4 Heaven Saint Masters from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom and 1 Heaven Saint Master from the Pingyang Kingdom were quickly beaten by the 4 Imperial Advisors from the Qinhuang Kingdom to the point where they all spat out mouthfuls of blood. "Seal the saint force in their bodies," an old man said. He then formed a seal with his hands and used a secret technique to seal the saint force of the 5 Heaven Saint Masters. With their strength sealed, the 5 Heaven Saint Masters from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom and the Pingyang Kingdom all paled. With their strength sealed, they had become fish on the chopping block. They did not even have the chance to escape. The 4 state teachers of the Qin Empire escorted the 5 sealed Heaven Saint Masters to the old man holding the snow-white magical beast. He was the strongest person present, so the others all followed his lead. The old man holding the snow-white magical beast arrived in front of Chang Wuji and Kafir and said, "Old man Xiaotian, under the orders of the Imperial Protector, I have come to assist you. If you have any use for us, feel free to ask. There is no need to be courteous. As for the people from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom, I will leave them to you." Chang Wuji and Kafir were extremely excited. After exchanging a few pleasantries with the state teachers of the Qin Empire, they politely invited the 5 to the top of the city wall. The sealed Heaven Saint Masters from the Hidden Dragon Kingdom were also sent to the guillotine and beheaded in front of everyone. The heads of the 9 Heaven Saint Masters were hung high above the northern fort of the kingdom of Jessen. The hands of these Heaven Saint Masters were stained with the blood of countless soldiers of the kingdom of Jessen. Moreover, they had killed the 2 peak experts stationed at the eastern fort of the kingdom of Jessen. Their crimes were unforgivable. If they were not killed, it would be difficult to appease the hatred in the hearts of the soldiers. In the huge city gate tower, all the famous generals of the northern fortress were gathered here. They were all looking at the 5 imperial teachers of the Qin Huang kingdom with excitement and excitement. For hours later, the 5 imperial advisors of the Qin Huang kingdom all went their separate ways. Xiao Tian went to the eastern fort alone with a small magical beast in his arms. The remaining 4 Heaven Saint Masters also went their separate ways to the western fort and the southern fort, respectively. Chapter 407. The 5 Heaven Saint Masters from the Qin Huang kingdom did not stay at the northern stronghold for too long. They were all under the orders of the imperial protector to assist the Jessan kingdom in defending against their enemies. So when they learned of the current situation of the Jessan kingdom from the commanders of the northern stronghold, they immediately split up into 3 groups to assist the eastern, southern, and western strongholds of the Jessan kingdom. The northern stronghold of the Jessan kingdom was still guarded by the 2 Heaven Saint Masters, Changwuji and Kafir. After taking the Radiant Spirit pills from the 5 Heaven Saint Masters, they quickly stabilized their bodies and began to heal. With the help of the Radiant Saint Masters, their wounds began to heal at a rapid rate. The millions of soldiers from the Pingyang Kingdom had already suffered heavy casualties from the previous battle between the Heaven Saint Masters. With 5 of their own dead, their morale had taken a huge hit and no longer had the will to fight. Thus, the army retreated 15 kilometers away from the stronghold. By now, the situation at the northern stronghold of the Jessan Kingdom had temporarily stabilized. However, if the 4 kingdoms did not retreat, then the crisis would not be resolved. At this moment, an uninvited guest had arrived at the imperial palace of the Pingyang Kingdom. Jian Qin had already arrived at the imperial palace of the Pingyang Kingdom and was now walking toward the palace gates. Although the Pingyang Kingdom was in a war, the imperial palace was extremely calm without a single trace of nervousness. "Halt! What are you doing?" Just as Jian Qin was about to enter the palace gates, he was stopped by 2 guards. Jian Qin's eyes flashed as an azure and violet sword chi shot out from his fingertips and slashed at the necks of the 2 guards. The 2 guards didn't even have a chance to cry out before falling to the ground. This scene in front of them caused the faces of the other guards to change. Immediately, one of them cried out, "Impudent! He's here to cause trouble. Capture him." There were at least 30 guards standing guard at the gates of the Pingyang Kingdom in a single line. Hearing the shout, the rest of the guards didn't hesitate and immediately took out their saint weapons to charge at Jian Qin. Jian Qin's face was emotionless and his eyes were cold. With a light tap of his finger, a ray of azure and violet sword chi shot out from his fingertips toward the 30 soldiers that were charging at him. Each of the sword chi accurately struck their throats, creating a fist-sized hole in their throats. Blood sprayed into the air like a blooming flower. The 30 guards didn't even have a chance to cry out before they fell to the ground. In an instant, the pristine marble floor was dyed red with blood as a bloody smell began to fill the air. Suddenly, an ear-piercing whistle came from the walls of the imperial palace. The scene below was discovered by the soldiers on the walls, and they immediately blew the whistle. The whistle was hurried and long, and it was the highest level of warning. Not long after, a series of heavy footsteps could be heard coming from the palace gates. The sounds were so uniform that it sounded like the drums of war. At the same time, the palace gates of the Pingyang Kingdom slowly opened up as a group of armored soldiers came running out. Each one of them had a cold expression on their faces and a cold glare. This was a group of elite soldiers that had been baptized by slaughter. In front of this group of elite soldiers, a silver-armored middle-aged man rode on top of a Class 3 magical beast. His cold eyes swept over the 30 soldiers that had fallen to the ground before finally landing on the 20-year-old Jian Qin. With a wave of his hand, he roared, "Capture him!" The elite soldiers behind the middle-aged man immediately charged forward and surrounded Jian Qin in a fan-shaped encirclement. Jian Qin had a disdainful smile on his face as he pointed out with his finger. One after another, the azure and violet sword chi shot out. Against this finger-sized sword chi, The group of elite soldiers didn't even have a chance to dodge before their throats were pierced by the azure and violet sword chi. In the blink of an eye, another 40 soldiers had fallen to the ground. The middle-aged man on top of the Class 3 magical beast had a serious look on his face as a 3-meter-long earthen spear appeared in his hand. Leaping down from his mount, he charged at Jian Chen with the spear in his hand, stabbing at Jian Chen's throat like a bolt of lightning. The middle-aged man was a first-cycle Earth Saint Master, but this level of strength wasn't enough to enter Jian Chen's eyes. With the point of his finger, a faint azure and violet sword chi shot out from Jian Chen's finger and collided with the middle-aged man's spear. Ding! Following a clear sound, the middle-aged man's body began to tremble as the azure and violet sword chi had shaken his arms to the point of numbness. Instead of moving forward, he was sent flying back to the ground. By the time he hit the ground, he had uncontrollably retreated a dozen steps. At that moment, another azure and violet sword chi shot out from Jian Chen's finger and pierced through the middle-aged man's throat before he could even stabilize himself. Ho! The middle-aged man's magical beast mount was a black panther. With a low growl, the black panther shot toward Jian Chen. The azure and violet sword chi condensed on Jian Chen's fingertip without even looking at the panther. Just as the panther approached him, Jian Chen waved his right hand, and the azure and violet sword chi sliced through the panther's head like it was tofu. The elite soldiers that had followed the middle-aged man had over 200 men, but at this moment, all of their faces had blanched. Jian Chen's display of strength was enough to strike fear into their hearts. Quick, sound the war drums. Hurry up and sound the drums. The remaining soldiers knew that Jian Chen's strength wasn't something they could stop, so they quickly ran back to the imperial palace. Dong 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 dong. The sound of the war drums could be heard from within the imperial palace. The sound was so loud that everyone in the imperial palace could hear it. Hearing the sound of the war drums, everyone in the imperial palace was stunned. They couldn't even remember how many years it had been since they last heard the sound of the war drums. But soon after, everyone came to their senses, and the entire imperial palace began to bustle with activity. Groups of armored men began to appear from all over the imperial palace as they began to gather at the entrance of the imperial palace. Not wanting to fall behind, the experts that were hidden within the imperial palace began to fly toward the entrance as well. Under the control of Jian Chen's mind, the 2 bronze lions at the entrance of the palace began to float into the air. With a faint layer of azure and violet sword chi surrounding them, they began to fly toward the walls of the palace at an extremely fast speed. Bang! 2 loud booms rang out, and 2 huge holes appeared in the incomparably sturdy city wall. The palace gate, which was completely made of steel, was also completely destroyed. Chapter 408. The 5 imperial advisors of the Qin Empire did not stay in the kingdom of Jessen's northern fortress for too long. They obeyed the orders of the imperial protector and came to assist the kingdom of Jessen in fending off the invaders. Hence, when they heard about the current situation in the kingdom of Jessen from the generals in the northern fortress, they immediately split into 3 groups and went to assist the eastern, western, and eastern fortresses of the kingdom of Jessen. The northern fortress of the kingdom of Jessen was still guarded by the 2 heaven saint masters, Changwuji and Kafir. They consumed the radiant spiritual pills given by the 5 imperial advisors and went to treat their wounds. Very quickly, they stabilized their bodies and healed their wounds with the help of a large number of radiant saint masters. The million-strong army of the kingdom of Pingyang had already suffered heavy casualties in the previous battle with the Heaven Saint Masters. Now that 5 of their Heaven Saint Masters had been killed, their morale took a huge hit and they no longer had the will to fight. The army retreated 30 miles and did not move. Currently, the situation in the northern fortress of the kingdom of Jessen had stabilized. However, if the 4 allied armies did not retreat, the crisis would still not be resolved. At this moment, an uninvited guest was welcomed in the royal capital of the kingdom of Pingyang. Jianqin had already arrived at the royal palace of the kingdom of Pingyang after flying for some time. He walked towards the entrance of the royal palace with an expressionless face. Although there was a huge battle going on outside the kingdom of Pingyang, the royal palace was very peaceful. There was not the slightest bit of tension. "Stop, what are you doing?" Just as Jianqin approached the entrance of the royal palace, he was stopped by two guards. Jianqin's eyes flashed, and a ray of azure sword qi shot out from his fingertips. His right hand swept across the necks of the two guards like a bolt of lightning. The two guards guarding the palace gate fell to the ground without even making a sound. This scene caused the rest of the guards to change their expressions. Someone immediately shouted, "How dare you! He is here to cause trouble! Quickly capture him!" There were more than 30 guards guarding the entrance of the royal palace of the Pingyang kingdom. They stood in a straight line on both sides of the palace gate. Hearing this shout, the rest of the guards did not hesitate and rushed towards Jianqin with their saint weapons. Jianqin remained emotionless. His eyes were cold as he gently extended his finger. Strands of azulite, sword qi, shot out from the tip of his finger, shooting toward the 30 or so soldiers. They accurately struck their throats, creating fist-sized holes in their throats. Blood splattered in the air like blooming flowers. More than 30 guards couldn't even let out a scream before they fell to the ground one after another. The spotless marble floor was dyed red in the blink of an eye, and a faint smell of blood permeated the air, slowly spreading to the surroundings. Suddenly, an ear-piercing whistle came from the walls of the royal palace. The scene below had been discovered by the guards on the walls. They immediately blew the whistle to warn the guards. The whistle was long and hurried, the highest level of warning. Not long after, a series of heavy footsteps could be heard coming from the closed palace door. The sound was uniform, as if a war drum was beating. At the same time, the closed palace door of the Pingyang kingdom slowly opened. A pair of armored soldiers ran out in uniform steps. Each of them had a cold expression on their face, and their eyes were sharp and cold. This was an elite troop that had been baptized by the baptism of slaughter. Their aura was magnificent. In front of this group of elite soldiers, a middle-aged man wearing silver white armor rode on a rank 3 magic beast. His cold gaze swept across the 30 or so fallen soldiers in front of the palace gate. Finally, his gaze landed on Jianqin, who looked to be in his 20s. He waved his hand and shouted, "Capture him!" The group of elite soldiers behind the middle-aged man immediately rushed forward and surrounded Jianqin in a fan shape. Jianqin's mouth revealed a trace of disdain. His finger continuously moved, and purple and green, sword qi, continuously shot out. Facing this finger-sized sword qi, the group of elite soldiers didn't have the slightest ability to dodge. One by one, the sword qi pierced through their throats. In the blink of an eye, another 40 or so soldiers fell to the ground. The middle-aged man, riding on the rank 3 magic beast, had a serious expression. Then, a 3-meter-long yellow spear appeared in his hand. He jumped down from his mount and quickly rushed towards Jianqin. The yellow spear in his hand was like lightning as he stabbed towards Jianqin's throat. The middle-aged man was a first-cycle Earth Saint Master. This kind of strength was simply not enough to enter Jianqin's eyes. Jianqin pointed his finger, and a faint purple and green sword qi shot out from his fingertip and collided with the middle-aged man's spear. Ding! With a crisp sound, the middle-aged man's body violently shook. An azure violet sword qi that was as thick as a finger had actually caused his arms to become numb. Instead of moving forward, he was sent flying backwards. When he landed on the ground, he had uncontrollably taken over 10 steps back. At this moment, another purple and green sword qi shot out from Jianqin's fingertip. Before the middle-aged man could even stabilize his body, the sword qi had already pierced his throat. Roar! The middle-aged man was riding on a black panther. It let out a deep roar and turned into a black blur as it shot towards Genshin. The faint purple and green sword chi did not disperse at the tip of Genshin's finger. He did not even glance at the Black Panther. Just as the Black Panther approached him, he waved his right hand, and the sword chi at the tip of his finger cut off the panther's head like it was tofu. There were over 200 elite soldiers who had come with the middle-aged man. At this moment, all of their expressions changed. The strength that Genshin had displayed had already made them feel fear. "Quick, sound the war drums! Quick, sound the war drums!" The remaining soldiers knew that Genshin's strength was not something that they could stop, so they all fled back to the palace. Dong, 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 dong. The heavy sound of the war drums rang out in the palace. The sound had a very strong penetrative force, so everyone in the palace could hear it. Hearing the sound of the war drums, everyone in the palace was stunned. They could not remember just how many years it had been since they last heard the sound of the war drums. However, soon after, everyone reacted and the entire palace immediately became lively. Groups of people wearing helmets and armors appeared all over the imperial palace and quickly gathered at the entrance of the imperial palace. The experts hidden in the imperial palace were not willing to be left behind and rushed towards the entrance of the imperial palace. Under Jian Chen's control, the two copper lions that weighed over 5,000 kilograms levitated into the air. Afterwards, a faint layer of azure and violet sword chi covered them as they smashed towards the walls of the imperial palace at an extremely fast speed. Boom! Two huge explosions rang out as two huge holes were smashed into the sturdy walls. The palace gates that were completely made of steel were also completely destroyed.